In the real world, we've spent hundreds of years digging up fossils, putting them together, identifying them, and using them as a way to understand what happened in our world over 500 million years ago. So, when we look at Pokemon, we can do the same. From Kabuto to Dracovish, I'm going to lay out when these Pokemon lived, including our non-fossil ancient Pokemon like Mamoswine and Relicanth, what they're inspired by, who do they live with, what their time period was like, how long they lived, and so much more throughout this video. We'll even discuss the potential for future fossil or ancient Pokemon, and a really big question, were they really Pokemon before they became fossils? Howdy there, I'm Curlic, but before we continue, this video, I'm claiming here and now, is the culmination of every constructive piece of criticism you have given me. Every compliment, every constructive criticism, everything that I need to improve, everything that I needed to do to make sure that this video is as perfect as I can get it. So, what I have decided to do is, not only did I read, I'm gonna grab it right here, not only did I read this wonderful book, The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs by Stephen Bersati, but I also reached out to the author, who then answered questions to me directly, absolutely beautiful human being, in email. He was away on his excursions, most likely taking care of more research. So I'm amazed that the guy was even, he was wonderful enough to reach back out to me, in addition to checking out a number of other resources to make sure I feel comfortable and I'm actually confident in my factual research. No more guesswork, and if I feel uncomfortable with saying something, I'm gonna say it, because I want as exact information as possible to be given to you. Oh yeah, by the way, it took like 20.5 hours of pure research. So if you want to support deep research projects like this, please subscribe. Maybe become a member on here or Patreon. There are additional perks. You get sneak peeks behind the scenes of sketches, the process, video ideas that may not be put to public just yet, and emotes that are custom made. So with that then, thank you so much for watching, and let's move on with the video. As always, this video is going to be organized by chapter. It's going to be organized by time periods in which these Pokemon would have existed based on their real life counterpart. I will also not be including legendaries or mythical Pokemon, or Ultra Beasts, of course. Those don't really fit in, as they get their own video. Again, I've mentioned it so many times, they deserve to get their own entire video, and I don't want to muddle things up even more. This is going to be about fossils and ancient Pokemon. There is one exception to that rule though. Okay? So, why don't we begin with the Paleozoic Era? So, I do have my notes that I'm going to keep reading if you see my eyes go over there, but as just a tiny notes, and I'm sorry for the rambling, but I now have just the tiniest little Gengar. Ooh, that went dark. Ooh, that was automatic, whatchamacallit. But this tiny little Gengar that exists right there, so that way I have something to look at consistently to keep my gaze. So that way, hopefully I look at you guys a little bit better and not get distracted all the time. But how about we begin with the Paleozoic Era, more specifically the Cambrian Period. Basically, the umbrella is the era, and the more specific time span are the periods of time. So, the Cambrian Period, beginning about 541 million years ago, this is where you get a lot of your major groups of animals in which they first appear. There is also the Cambrian explosion, as it's called, due to the diversity. So if you're wondering what diversity is, this can pertain to like the physical appearance of a creature. Basically, think of it like this, because for on the surface it seems superficial, but as you go deeper it helps a lot more. Basically, you have, like, let's say you have a worm. Well, the worm is gonna develop. Now you have a worm with fingers, or a worm with hands, or whatever. It's the point of this exact moment and explaining diversity isn't about the specific ideas. It's more about understanding that creatures need to develop in different ways, so that way when something bad happens, and let me tell you, a lot of bad stuff is gonna happen over the next 500 million years, then it hopefully means that some of these species will survive. So that's why you need diversity in animals and so on and so forth. So not everything's gonna be a dog. That's why you have cats, even though they're completely unrelated. I'm going off on a tangent and I'm going to cut myself off here because that gets into a whole other thing that some people are going to be better off explaining than I am, because that potentially goes even further into DNA, and I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. Another important thing to understand is that chordates started here. This is basically vertebrates. You know, you got your nice backbone right over here. It technically means us, but it's not us. Now, there's no real reason why the explosion necessarily happened. To our knowledge, maybe it was oxygen levels, maybe it was the warming climate, and maybe it was the rising sea levels with low landmass. By the way, this was before Pangea. Instead, this is known as Gondwana. Gondwana, over time, eventually collides with North America, Europe, and Siberia to form Pangea, when it's moving towards the poles and all the continents are doing their little shuffle around, trying to get past each other in the hallway here, and then they end up slamming into each other anyway. So, ultimately though, during this time period, there are more than 17,000 different species that we know of. Now, that's crazy because guess what? Most of these species, or we think that most of these species are like the ones that like we think there are 17,000. There are probably way more. So they're gone. They're gone. Like, maybe we'll find them, but even the ones that we find, how can we be sure that that was it? So I'm going to end up saying throughout this video a lot that we know of, and you can thank that to this wonderful source here. Gosh, it was a treat to listen to. Thank you so much, because anything before the dinosaurs, a lot of it I am pulling from my information from her video. Last note though, before we do continue, and we name the first Pokemon that appear in the history on the planet, I will be separating some of the Pokemon and their evolutions based on their inspirations, which is gonna be very fitting because of real life evolution. So keep that in mind as we especially move forward and get our first example, Kabuto. Kabuto is based on the trilobite and the horseshoe crab. Now, trilobites appeared roughly about 521 million years ago, and horseshoe crabs we'll talk about in a moment, as let's just focus on the trilobites first. Trilobites, first off, are the Wisconsin State fossil. Represent, baby, let's go! So, also, I had to use it as my logo for Pokemon Lost Sign, which a fan game that I'm trying to make, but also don't have the time for right now. Oopsie boopsies, I did a whoopsie, and I know I have some of you guys hounding me on that. I'll get there. I'm one guy that's editing and doing all of his art, except for his emotes and so on and so forth. Your boy ain't got no time when I'm doing everything. But, I digress. There are 20,000 trilobites, over 20,000 trilobites that we know of. They were just all over the place, and they dominated the waters. And in the terms of domination, they weren't like, you know, taking these other Pokemon and just like, bah, bah. No, what they were doing is they were just all over the place, you know. Like, it's like having 1,000 M&Ms and then there's one or two, I don't know, Skittles. That's not a fair representation of what it actually was. But just to give you an idea, the M&Ms are dominating over the Skittles. It's like, I don't know. I'm not going to give you a percent split between trilobite versus everything else, because that would just be incorrect. But again, they were all over the place, and they were dominating in terms of numbers. Now, they do have a very unique shell. It was three section trilobite arthropod that are in the same family but not direct ancestors of pill bugs. So if you ever look at a pill bug and you look at a trilobite and you're like, hey, you look familiar, and it's like, hey, you don't. It's because they're not actually family. And you know what? Okay, hold on, stop. They are family but not direct ancestors. So, you know, far removed, maybe fifth cousin removed, I don't know. Nevertheless, trilobites live for a very, very long time, So when they eventually bite the dust, I'll let you know. Now, they were the first to develop complex eyes and multiple appendages for moving around that we know of, and they could range from less, like a centimeter or less, all the way to like 70 centimeters long. 70 centimeters. I'm a filthy American, and even though I was taught to use centimeters, my brain doesn't always automatically shoot for what 70 centimeters is, but that's not small. Holy sh! 27 inches! These things were up to 27 inches long! I'm sorry. Okay, I know the idea is that I research everything, but sometimes I sit down and go, 70 centimeters. I'm just gonna write that down. I know that that is, reliable information, and I'm moving on. Other times, like right now, I'm like, you know what? I'm extra curious. Freaking almost 30 feet long trilobite! What? Now, they potentially ate worms or other invertebrates, but also were scavengers or filter feeders. Kabuto likely is also based on the original trilobite. So, yeah, Kabuto would be super extinct. But now let's get combining the horseshoe crab into this. Now, horseshoe crabs lived about 445 million years ago, and the ones back then are not the same species that exist today. They are, though, most closely related to arachnids. Yeah. That's not creepy at all the more you think about it. And what's a really fun thing is that they have blue blood. Now, if you didn't know that, it's something that I learned a long time ago and I had to be updated on it because I was curious. Their blue blood has immune cells that are exceptionally sensitive to toxic bacteria and clot around it. Now, usually when you say the word sensitive, you think really bad, and not necessarily, especially in this case. Basically, the idea for sensitive here, to oversimplify it, is that when toxic bacteria enters its body or whatever happens, then its body reacts very quickly, senses it very quickly, and those immune cells are going. They're reacting faster. So, there's that. Now, because that's incredibly useful for our science in developing new vaccines, or at least it can be, they used to be bled quite often, and actually bled, take their blood to then synthesize and create what we need. There's a lot of methods to it that are being improved so that way they don't actually die from the bleeding method. And in addition, a protein is being created so that way hopefully you just don't have to bleed them at all anymore. I didn't go down that rabbit hole in its entirety. It was just fun information to start finding out. Now, they are on the vulnerable species list, and some species of it are endangered, with, I believe, 4 total horseshoe crab species in existence. This type of stuff, or their endangerment, is being caused by shoreline hardening, sea level rise, and ranges being destroyed by development. And, 2 of which are very much directly caused by a shoreline hardening, building structures on, on a sandy beach area shoreline, and, or they're, like I said, ranges being destroyed for development. So, a decent amount of direct influence and sea level rising. We'll talk about a lot of that later. I won't delve into that specific thing now. Instead, let's also continue to talk about what they eat, which are small clams, crustaceans, and worms. They might eat other animals or algae. Shrug. Now, what they do is they have to actually, because they don't have jaws and all of that, so they don't have a strong, biting force available to them. So what they'll do is, and this, again, will very much apply to Kabuto especially, is it's going to just grab something near it, you know, let's say it grabs its prey, or maybe it is grabbing whatever other food it can, and it's going to just crush it. It is just going to crush it between its legs until it's softer, malleable, and then put it into its mouth. By the way, yeah, guess what? Nothing right now of all the creatures that exist right now that we know of, none of them have jaws. That has not developed yet. It does not exist. That's not going to come in until the Silurian Period, you know, just a couple million years from now. So we'll get there. But ultimately, Kabuto starts us all off and is the first one. Now, it would be fun to see what other ones might exist around that time, like the ancient worms and everything like that. But let's not focus on Kabuto right now, and let's move on to the next entry to the species of our world that we're going to talk about in terms of Pokemon. Anorith. Based on Anomalocaris, which existed 500 million years ago during the Cambrian Period, Anorith, though, states that it lived 100 million years ago, so we can't 100% rely on the Pokédexes to give us proper, accurate information, because if Anorith lived 100 million years ago, it would make zero sense whatsoever in regards to so many of the other Pokemon that existed in that timeline in addition to dinosaurs. Though, despite this, its real-life version, the Anomalocaris, was an apex predator! Oh, it's so cool! Okay, so, Anomalocaris. It's a meter long, or roughly a meter long. Anorith is 0.7 meters. It had wings for speed, claws for attack and grip. If we look at the two, right? If we look at the two, they are dang similar. Like, they are spitting image, right? Now, let's just take that into account first and foremost. Like, they are the same exact thing, right? Now, while also doing all of this research, Pokemon decided to open up their whole museum thing, which made me so much more excited when I was doing this research, because it just kind of triple confirms everything that I'm running down and that where the basis of it actually comes from, which is very exciting and makes my life so much easier. But when we look at Anomalocaris, they hunted trilobites. Again, same exact thing. Very fast swimmers. Them being an apex predator wasn't necessarily about them being the biggest or anything like that. They were just simply fast, good swimmers, had some nice claws that they could rip you apart with, and they just did a good job. I mean, if you look at some additional features that they even had compound eyes. Compound eyes are just going to help them see a little bit better. So oddly enough, I had to double check it, but the Anomalocaris is likely related to shrimp, sponges, and jellyfish. Thank you, Berkeley, for being that source for that, because I didn't want to believe it to the point where I had to quadruple check my information, because they stated that all three of them likely came from one animal or were likely the same animal at one point. Of course, that's a weird way of saying evolutionary ancestors and everything like that, but nevertheless, that was Anomalocaris. It's just a really cool mon. I mean, it even has the little feathers on this side, which may have actually helped it swim better overall. Now, considering that this is the age of bugs, for the most part, technically, all this explains the fact that Anorith itself has that bug typing, because mammals were but a glint in the eye of ancient creatures that still don't even exist yet. We are so far away from mammals. We haven't even really touched on lizards yet. We're not even out of this time period, as putting a close on the wonderful Anorith. Lovely, lovely creature. I kind of want an Anorith plush now. And we're going to move forward with Lileep and Cradily. Now you might be thinking I'm moving a little fast between some of these. I'm trying to make sure I take my time and explain them as best as I can. But before the dinosaurs, I don't have the full confidence and strength and really, really deep data to talk about some of these creatures, which is why it's staying fairly short. I guarantee you now, when we get to dinosaurs, dinosaur morphs, the non-dinosaurs of that era, it's gonna get a lot more it's gonna get a lot deeper. But for now, again, Lily and Cradley. Based on crinoids, which are given the nickname sea lilies because of their appearance, even though they're not actually lilies in the slightest. They existed about 490 million years ago, but some still live to this day. Once again, we are in the same bowl that states that they are likely not the same exact species that lived so long ago. Now, their skeletons themselves are made out of calcite. Calcite is calcium. It's calcite. So it's soft, whitish, brittleish rock. Kind of think like chalk. Now, as a note, chalk is not directly calcite. It's like a limestone-esque of calcite. So don't just start saying they're the same thing, okay? We got a different situation going on there. It's transformation. Now, did this to myself. To better explain that, chalk is a soft, white, porous, sedimentary carbonate rock, a form of limestone composed of the mineral calcite. Now, similar to Lily and Cradley, or rather exactly as they did, the crinoids also anchored themselves to the seabed. Now, the difference between the two is that while Lily or Cradley will wait for some unsuspecting fish to pass by and then just give it a smack, the crinoids instead are just filter feeders. So maybe they're giving smacks on a much smaller scale, but not really. Think of other things like sponges. I just immediately think of the SpongeBob scene where he's like, no, it's fine, I can filter feed. That's just where my brain goes. So moving forward though, these crinoids are abundant in limestone and shale. Now, this is a perfect time for me to sit down and explain, and I'm not gonna actually sit down, fossils and how they're found in sediment, which makes it very difficult to determine time frame to a pinpoint and soft tissue being lost. Now, when I say sediment, I moreover mean sedimentary rock. So now this is the perfect time for me to explain fossils and sedimentary rocks and how they're related. Because basically, let's put it this way. I'm going to super simplify it, as I kind of have been for a number of different things, just to not bog us down too much. Let's say you die right now. You just drop dead. Well, you're probably in your house, unless you are asleep right now, or you're mowing the lawn, or whatever other number of hundreds of different things. Okay, that you don't mow your lawn inside. Either way, other 100 different things that might be inside your house. Well, that's whatever. You know, you're gonna decay, so on and so forth. But let's say you're an animal running around in the woods or something along those lines, right? And let's just magically say that it's not like a ton of bugs around, whatever else. There's so many different factors that go into it, which is why I'm going to oversimplify it. Let's say you die outside. Well, let's say, you know, even after the bugs do get to you or any other creatures get to you, your bones and everything else is left behind. Well, over years of time, you're going to get layers of sediment dropped on you by just life in general. We're gonna get rocks, minerals, technically decaying matter as well, and all of that is going to layer over you more and more. Maybe the water in your body is going to get replaced by minerals, and eventually you become a fossil in its own right. Now, there are lots of different kinds of fossils, and you might get like impression fossils, you might get actual fossils like that. So the interesting thing is that feathers, hair, a couple of other things are very, very, very difficult to preserve when it comes to fossilization. They are more transient. They are easier for them to basically transition, disappear, break down, so on and so forth, right? Now, in this manner, unless you are, let's say, buried by a mudslide or Pompeii, basically, a lot of those extra things are not going to be preserved as part of the fossil, okay? And that's going to be important for later. So once again, fossils are found in sediments, and it makes it difficult to specifically date when certain creatures lived. There are other methods and ways that have helped actual scientists who are in that field actually be able to date these creatures. Also, this is a really good time for me to bring this up because I think this is fun. I do have honeycomb coral fossil myself. Let me, hold on. So you can kind of see here all the little holes in it. Or at least I believe it is honeycomb coral fossil. I could be wrong, but you can even see, let's see if I put it in the light just right, you're gonna see some nice little sparkles there. And this isn't the only one that I have, but ultimately, if I could get my... But ultimately, what happened is the coral, let's say, died, and over the course of time, its body, quote unquote, was replaced by rock. This happens with buried wood over the course of a ridiculous amount of time that I'm not going to put a number to because it takes a long time, right? And I'm not confident in figuring that amount of time out or giving you a time. And that one, I believe, is moreover replaced by quartz. I did have a professor that I did bring it into, and he was looking at it. He is a geologist and was like, yeah, that looks like honeycomb coral fossil to me. Does look like it was replaced by quartz. It could be replaced by other things if it were in different areas, of course, but it depends on its location, and it's not going to vary too much, you know. Now, this also relates actually back to pseudo-wudo, because I mentioned petrified wood, petrification, and I also realized while writing that down that pseudo-wudo, pseudo, S-U-D-O, sounds like pseudo, P-S-E-U-D-O, which basically means false wood. God, everything's a pun, and it just makes me smile so much. Now, to bring us back proper to Lillip and Cradily, we're going to finish up talking about Cradily specifically, as they are visually more similar to the predatory tunicate. And I mean, look at that. Look at that. Straight up. It is a modern filter feeding creature. They also reproduce by themselves. So that's always an interesting thing to see happen, where it's just like, yep, I don't need anybody else. Let me just, one more kid. Oh, there goes there we are. And it also eats apparently like a Venus flytrap does, where it just waits for something to come by and then it'll just slowly grab onto it and you're done. You're done. It's gonna hold on to you until you're dead. But despite the similarities, it is unrelated to crinoids. Also, for the love of everything, please forgive me if I pronunciate anything incorrectly. I get very caught up in how I'm talking or what I'm saying and very excited about it that even slowing down takes a lot of effort. Now we're moving on to the Ordovician Period. Now this occurred about 485 million years ago. This is about the time where marine life flourishes and becomes super diverse. But despite all those diversities, they still don't have jaws. So, oops. Now, this is also about the time where the first primitive plants begin to appear on land. And things get crazy. The plants of this time, just to talk very briefly about it, because it is another specific subject I'm not super comfortable trying to teach you on, because it is not where my focus was with this video. They are nothing like the plants that you would see today, or a lot of them weren't. Moreover, specifically, they didn't have bark. There wasn't bark, there were no seeds. That doesn't come in until later. Around this time, we are getting the brachiopods, not the brachiosaurs. No, brachiopods. They are different. I got confused when I first read that too. Do not worry. But brachiopods, graptolites, and conodonts, which were everywhere. Now, brachiopods, they look like clams and mussels, but are asymmetrical. So when you look at a clam or a mussel, when it closes and you look at its like the body structure, not necessarily the pattern exactly, but the body structure itself, it is symmetrical bottom and top, right? Whereas the brachiopods were not. They also apparently had tentacles that were around the mouth and a pedicle, pedio, like foot thing, which kept it attached to the seafloor. Unlike, the clams that you get that do their crazy little thing when they're moving around in SpongeBob. Why do I reference SpongeBob so much? I know I grew up with it, but man. Anywho, the graptolites themselves were weird colonial animals that lived in an interconnected system of tubes. Thank you again, British Geological Survey. I appreciate you. And the National Museum of History. That's where I got a lot of my other information. If it wasn't in the videos or from the book or talking to Versati. Thank you. But they to me, these weird things, they look like living wishbones with spikes inside of it to me, and it hurts my brain even just thinking about it now. I don't know. I feel like wishbones, after being broken on Thanksgiving often enough, decided that they wanted to fight back, and that's when these things were made, even though that's not really what they were. And I don't want to talk about it too much further because they hurt my brain. And they're irrelevant to what we're going to be talking about. It's just a fun little thing that exists here. Moving forward, we now have the conodonts, which made me flat out say when I saw it, I went, holy f***. Like, the illustration, I see the illustration, and it's a cute little illustration. Oh, it's so nice. I'm like, oh, you're so nice. And then I look at the rest of it, and it's just this weird, toothy, eel-looking thing that, again, doesn't have a jaw. No, it doesn't have a jaw. So you know what it does? It just has, lamprey-esque mouth-looking thing just kind of hanging out there. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay. That makes me uncomfortable. That makes me very uncomfortable. I even when I was going for even when I was going for my environmental degree before I dropped out of college, I always told myself I will do land management and that type of stuff. I am not going under the sea. I refuse to do that. I'm not necessarily super afraid of it, but I also know I get seasick and so on and so forth. So it's just not a good place for me. Let's just throw that out there. That's not fear. That's common sense. These things are used heavily to date rocks that are roughly 500 to 205 million years ago. They are very difficult to classify and very controversial. Okay? Now, I, again, couldn't find anything recent that states differently from those statements, and I'm not comfortable talking about these things at all because I do not want to give false information. So let's move on to what Pokemon lived during this era, or period is the more specific term to use and correct term. So things are gonna get a little bit scary here as we have Kabutops. Finally, yes, the Kabuto finally evolved into Kabutops. And they're based on what are called Eurypterids. Sea scorpions, you know, they lived 467.3 about million years ago and are just 6-foot scorpions living underwater. Why? Why? Why does nature, nature is terrifying. I just want to remind you this. Nature is terrifying, especially early on, because throughout all these 500 plus million years, I'm going to tell you right now, did they plan to have jaws? No. Did they plan to get legs? No. Do you know what was planned? Nothing. You don't plan evolution. That's not how that works. It is adaptations. It is what is most favorable to then breed with, to then create the generation that survives, and they keep doing that. You don't just walk onto land and just, oh, I didn't do it, whatever, sprout a foot. That's not how that works. You don't get to have 3 kids and then sprout a foot suddenly that you need. No, that's not how that works. So when these things are coming about and they're being created, it's like, you know, random BS go all over again until something works. So, and that's going to be important later when we talk about feathers and flight, because let me tell you something. Feathers weren't developed with the sole purpose or idea that things were gonna fly one day. They had a different purpose, and it just so happened to work out by pure luck. Until eventually, you know, the continual breeding of creatures of those favorable assets brought about a more developed version that gave them what they wanted to survive. Anyhow, I went off on a huge tangent. Am I out of focus by standing right there? I am. I'm sorry. Anywho, these things are terrifying. I do not like the Eurypterids, the sea scorpions. They're scary looking. And when you look at Kabutops, yes, how could you not? I mean, you're looking at the two and it's very similar enough. Now, the Wiki Bulbapedia, moreover, states that it's similar to, how do you say that word? I'm going to say Chirurus, because Chirurus, that hurts my brain. Trilobite genus. But it also has horse crab-like features, Kabutops. So I'm also going to argue that it's probably, if not accidentally, inspired by Hibertopterus, which was a sea scorpion with horseshoe crab-like features. Now you look at Kabutops, you very much will end up thinking, yeah, that's a fancy little horseshoe crab you got there, kid. But why does it have sides for hands? That doesn't feel very good. That makes me very uncomfortable. I feel like if I tried to hug it, it's going to go hunk. So yeah, no, you know, and then you get the sea scorpion in there. So maybe it's accidentally Hibertopterus, but nevertheless, that'll be an argument that I'll kind of like pose here ultimately. Now, funny enough, I know one of the things that you're probably wondering is whether or not Kabutops and Scyther are related. Like, did Kabutops evolve into Scyther? And I hate to break it to you, but the answer is no. Kabutops is not a direct ancestor of Scyther, but could still be related in some capacity. Even if it's not related, then I want you to think about divergent species, the same as Diglett and Wiglet. Essentially, with divergent species, unrelated species developed similar traits, physicalities primarily, due to external pressures. So in order to meet, you know, their needs, they had to adapt this feature. This could be body shape, it could be the sides that are here, there could be so many different things. Again, this is an overgeneralization. Now, these sea scorpions, they were apex predators. they hunted with those big, strong claws that they have, and they were possibly the largest creature of their time. And all of that comes together knowing it's an apex predator. It's gonna rip you apart. It's gonna chase after you. I don't know if it actually chased after you. That's just me painting a picture here. And then cut you in twain, snip, snip, as it brings us and gives us our terrifying Kabutops. Moving on, we have Ammonite and Omastar, based on true ammonites, which lived about 450 million years ago. Now, again, more specifically based on the first ammonites, since these also lived a very, very long time. They are believed to be like modern cephalopods with soft body tissue tentacles. Cephalopods? Octopi. Like, literally think an octopus in a shell, not a ghost in a shell. I haven't watched that. But that's basically what we see with Ammonite. Cute little guy until it turns into Omastar. Because that's when it gets its scary little beak, if we are going to think that it's similar to modern cephalopods. I remember being in college the first time around. I was going for my associates for forensics and investigations. And when I was going through that, I remember dissecting a squid. And I believe, I don't think I pulled out the beak, now I think about it. I think, because it was already dead. It was already dead, so I wasn't blessed. I didn't have to deal with that guilty consciousness on my head further than I already probably did at the time. But ultimately, it just had a nice, like, hard, kind of plasticky looking piece inside of its body, which I think was related to the back of it, like the actual, like, you know, not the face, but the rest of it. It's just a weird little thing that I remember all of a sudden. Now, these things, ammonites, ate plankton, crustaceans, and potentially even each other. And of course, they were also eaten by larger creatures. Now, we're looking at the possibility of over 10,000 different species of ammonites. They are a very common fossil, just like the trilobites are. In fact, they are considered a keystone species in determining time periods for rock formations. So, remember when I talked about sedimentary layers? Well, you could also get into other forms of layers or layering as we get into stratigraphy. Basically, there are a number of different things that you want in order to help determine time periods, and to help reliably do so. And keystone species can be a good point in that. Basically, the idea for keystone species when it comes to fossils, let's break it down, is you have a creature that is easily identifiable, is everywhere, like there's an abundance of them, and they are, well, I guess they're also just common. So there's a few other factors that go into it as well. And what it does is you can see that they existed in this timeline. Oh, that's one of the other factors. That's what it is. They are time specific. They don't exist throughout all of time. So, like the ammonites here, they existed during a specific period of time, or maybe a couple periods of time, and maybe have a little bit of overlap. But with these keystone species, you get all these different layers of rock that they might exist in. And let's say right now, we have a world pre-Pangea. Even if it was Pangea, this would still work, because the keystone species will exist, have lived and died within this time frame, would be included as fossils in the rock here. And if this rock splits off, separates whatever it is, then, and it goes, you know, literally what Pangea did, or will do later on when we talk about Pangea, because it's not even formed yet. If it were to break off and separate, we know that this rock and that rock were at the same place as long as the layers of rock match up to each other and they have those fossils in them to help with the surefireness of it. I couldn't think of the word all of a sudden. Reinforcement of that idea. There are special cases where rock ends up being removed. So you'll have layer A, B, C, D. Rock separates. You have A, B, C, D for pillar 1 and pillar 2, even if they're not pillars, just for this example. And let's say B disappears out of pillar 1. Well, because everything else, as long as it's in the correct and same order for the type of rock and that keystone species, we can still say with assuredness that they came from the same place. This is also how we were able to tell, or scientists were able to tell, I shouldn't say we, because I was not those people, that certain dinosaurs lived across the world and didn't develop separately magically to be the same exact way. So, that's a bunch of fun stuff right there. Small note, I actually, while like Omanite is on the thumbnail, I almost made it Archaeops/Archan, and then I almost made it Aerodactyl instead. I immediately thought of Archaeops because I like the feathering and the colors of them, and I'm gonna gush about Archaeopteryx later. I'm gonna be so happy. But we have to get through a couple 100 million years in order to get there. And I almost made it Aerodactyl because Aerodactyl is very much often seen as like the fossil Pokemon. He's just that guy. So I almost made it them. And then I sat down and I said, Lord Helix. It's a classic. How could you not? Also, I wanted to draw a cute Omanite. How could I not? All before I have to give you the bad news of everything's gonna hit the fan. I mean it. This is the first great dying that we know of as we transition from this period to the Silurian period. Now, there are lots of theories involved, and I'm not going to cover them all here. One, though, I will talk about is simply this. The world is getting colder. Mass glaciation, the formation of glaciers, takes up all of the water from the area, or a lot of the water from the area. Gondwana begins to move. Continental movements, everything shifting and moving along. When you're losing this much water and you have these big continents moving, and again, this isn't like, somebody kicked a table and it moved and now there's giant just ruptures happening. It's more like it's happening slowly. So everything that kind of just happens here happens over the course of a very long time, and it's a very slow and painful process. Now there's, of course, like ripple effects and all these other like more dramatic effects depending on when it is and when it really begins, and that's why this is important here. Anywho, because of the change in water levels due to glaciation and the movement of the continents, these water levels are going up and going down and going up and going down, and it's shifting and it's making uncomfortable creatures in the water. They can't adapt, they can't change fast enough, they don't have a reliable environment, their food sources are going all over the place. Maybe some of those food sources are dying off because they can't adapt fast enough. Things are getting ridiculous, and not only are the creatures disturbed, but because like when you think of water, I want you to think of humidity. Humidity helps control temperature. It keeps temperature even a lot of the time. Now, when you have water constantly shifting and moving and disappearing and coming back or whatever it is, this is disturbing climates, currents, habitats. Everything is being disturbed. Nobody is safe. You cannot be comfortable in your chair. You are not allowed to be sleeping right now. Actually, you are, because you probably are asleep, and I know that some people watch my videos, and that's why I level the audio completely. Anywho, we're going back to the past as this is a potential global cooling period. Yes, there is global warming and there is global cooling. It is a thing. It's a balance that the world does, and we'll talk more about global warming and climate change and all that later, because I don't want to rant about it now. There's a better place later that I have noted out for myself. Now, basically then global warming happens later on, and glacial retreat then brings about happens during the Silurian period itself. Now, you might ask, and there were questions, because it always is involved, was there a meteor, comets, asteroid thing that happened? The answer that we know of is no, and the reason being is there wasn't iridium found when going through the rock layers and everything. Now, you might be wondering, what's iridium? Well, it's not just related to your funny little Stardew Valley when you kiss your girlfriend or boyfriend or your whatever, you give the little apple things what they want and they give you the funny iridium. No, it's not about that. No, your iridium. Actually, no. In that game, you can get it from an asteroid, huh? I don't play Stardew. Anywho. They're related with asteroids, or we correlate them with asteroids a lot, at least when it comes to a lot of this, because of the fact that iridium is incredibly rare on our planet. So, with that being the case, iridium can be relied upon if it is suspected that a asteroid comet may have collided, and it will then deposit layers of iridium. We'll talk more about that later, because if it is a simple layer, like just a quick layer, not a lot of it, sure, there was a collision, fantastic. If there's a lot of it, like an absurd amount of it, it means that something more happened. And that's very important for later on, and I'm sorry that I keep saying later on, and I keep alluding to these bigger things that are going to happen later on, but I'm telling you, it's going to be cool, and I'm really excited, actually. So, anywho, because of all of this that happened, at the end of this period, tons of species from the creatures that we talked about went extinct. Now, I said species, not them as a whole, right? So, this would include the specific species of our Pokemon, that are at least the specific species that our Pokemon are based on, with exception to our Sea Scorpion Terror, to my knowledge. So, OG, Omanite, bye-bye. OG, Anorith, bye-bye. And no, this does not mean that everything died, because if everything died, then we would otherwise not be here. I wouldn't be here, and oh god, oh no. Welcome to the Silurian Period. So I would talk extensively about this period, but none of the Pokemon that we have actually came from it. So it's gonna be very brief, and there is important information that I want to talk about in regard to this period still. So, again, I'm not the most comfortable about anything, especially in this part, actually, because, yes, I did do my online reading, and I watched my videos from accredited sources, but it's not the same level of comfort as I get when talking about our dinos, because I read so much from the book specifically. Now, Silurian Period. 444 million years ago, still a very important period, as there was the diversification of fish here. Lots of different species of fish were kind of brought about here. In this section of time, jawless fish, yes, we still don't quite have jaws yet, we are getting there very soon, were spread just wide and rapid, just constantly making babies out there and figuring things out, right? This is also about the time when the first known freshwater fish came about, And eventually, somewhere in this time period, the first known fish with jaws was created. Now, you might be wondering, and if you're not, you should be. You should be. Why did they go from, well, we don't need jaws, we don't have jaws, we don't even know jaws exist, so why should we care? Well, the reason being, or at least from that to, oh, we have jaws, we munch a crunch a bunch of, well, that's literally the reason why. By having a jaw, you allow yourself more biting force, more movement, and overall gives you the ability to eat a wider variety of foods. You get that bite, you get that chew, you get that crunch, and you kind of probably seen it with like some forms of media where like we move our jaw up and down. I'm trying to talk a language that's very difficult. Ow. That didn't actually hurt, but it made me want to say ow. We move our jaw up and down, but you'll get like, you'll see in media, you get the, you know, the movement that of other creatures that might happen. It's dependent on how they move and eat their foods. So I'm not going to give any specific examples, but I'm thinking about cows, so maybe I just gave a specific example. Oopsie poopsies. Anywho, now this allowed these creatures that could eat a wider variety of foods to move around more, to not be as picky with the specific foods that they like to eat. And typically, what this results in is if you have a wider variety of foods to eat, you are going to increase your chances of survival, at least ensuring a better chance of you not dying by starvation because you don't like beans. Shut up. Eat your beans. They're a great source of protein. Also, it's, you know, I've slowly gotten better with eating beans myself, so it's a thing. Now, nevertheless, no Pokemon here, but it's very important period to make sure that I placed here and wanted to talk about. Welcome to the Devonian Period. We're getting crazy again as it's about 419 million years ago now. Lots of diversification once again. This sheer amount of diversification, especially because if we look at the previous period, they were rapidly diversifying, right? They were rapidly, you know, having babies. And if you just keep doing that and you're having all these different species and they are, let's say maybe they're also rapidly diversifying and they're having lots of kids, eventually you're going to get a lot of testing the waters. Pun wasn't intended, but I want to say it was. But you get a lot of testing the waters as you're just going to keep trying out different things and see what works as indirectly as a species. And so you get a lot of very, very bizarre creatures that exist in this time period. And this time period is known as the Age of Fishes. Fishes. That feels weird. That felt wrong. I'm leaving that in though. Land plants also at this point started to show a lot of diversification. We'll come back to that as that is going to be super important. Sorry for keep saying that. Oh well. But this is the time period in which like the first forests and the first seeds and the first soils were starting to be created. And soils, you need like weathered rock, minerals, organic matter, air, and water. And that's a lot actually, especially early on. And when it comes to seeds, those are so important. Again, the first seeds, you have something that is encased safely in a hard shell that can survive years and years and years and are produced in mass. There are plants that will produce hundreds of thousands of seeds a year in the modern day. And it works still. There's a reason why they still do it. It works. It is an amazing development. And what this is off the top of my head. I want to make sure I'm starting to say that. so that way you guys know I didn't research this, and I could be incorrect. So what I'm about to say is off the top of my head, but I remember there being like a governmental warehouse where if all our crops bite the dust, like it just gets wiped out because of like disease, because of war, because of whatever else it might be, then this warehouse, this bunker that exists, has seeds of all different types from so many immensely different species, so that way things can be restarted. I don't know anything else about that. It's just something that I generally knew about, and it's been easily a decade since I last heard about it. But I digress. This is also where our oldest fossils of insects and spiders date, and where tetrapods first appeared. Tetrapods, pods, pod, remember that? We have, wow, that sounded very condescending, and I don't mean to. I'm gonna say it like that again anyway, because it's funny. Pod, that, feet, four-footed animals, which includes all vertebrates really higher than fish. Now, it doesn't necessarily technically need to be feet, basically any form of support limb by definition. So, maybe there's not like an actual foot at the end of it, but, it's like, I don't know, I'm not gonna call it a fist, but you know what I mean. I don't need to explain it. I think you're smart. You're smart enough. You got this. I believe in you. Hey, I believe in you. Go get a snack. Make sure you're hydrated. If you're sleeping, I don't know, have sweet dreams or have weird dreams. I don't know. Keep it appropriate. And at the end of this period, I will say, and you can say it with me now, things got a little crazy. But let's talk about the Pokemon that lived here first before we go make ourselves depressed. Relicanth. So I had, oh gosh, Relicanth is so cool, honestly. So your first introduction to Relicanth, or what it's based on, Coelacanths, which I used to say or pronounce it as Coelacanth. You can't blame me. You can't blame me. Me doing research educates me as well. There are a lot of things that I'm ignorant on. I do not have a degree in this. Mine is in forensic investigations and associates, and then the arts and sciences, because I was going for a bachelor's in environmental policy and plan making. So like this is separate. You know what I mean? But Coelacanth, right? And there's the documentary, which I should have included as part of my list of sources, where they're so incredibly rare. And I mean like very, very, very rare. And in the documentary, they were trying to make sure that they could tag it safely, so that way they could very easily, or just that way they could get data on coelacanths, because otherwise we at that time knew so very little on them. Were there migration patterns? What kind of water are they really in most of the time? We know that they prefer like the really, really deep caves, because that's where the temperature is cooler, if I remember correctly. The coelacanths of modern day are not the same exact coelacanths of the past, okay? Just like with the horseshoe crabs, just keep that in mind. Now, the ones in the past were one of the first 3 creatures that first traveled onto land, okay? And that's why they're very important. So they tagged the coelacanths. I think it took them like 8 or 9 days to actually tag them. It was very arduous. And they had to do with depressurization as they came back up, of course. And ultimately, you're going to get, or they would have gotten, plenty of really good data on these coelacanths. So you can always look into that as well. I actually didn't look into what data was derived from that, and I couldn't really find it anyway. So If you have anything else that I don't mention as I go forward talking about coelacanths that you might know, please share them. I'm very excited about them because, again, the first time you might have actually seen them was probably in Atlantis, and I didn't really watch that until about 3 years ago. I like Planet, or Treasure Planet. I really want to go watch Treasure Planet now. But just think about this for a second. Coelacanths being one of the first creatures to walk onto land, quote unquote walk. And that is really interesting because, like, the way that they move their fins is alternating. They alternate their fins, and they have, they have more than 2. So I had to actually look it up, and they have apparently 8 fins, and they're alternating pattern of movement with them. Think of it like a horse, which is really freaking cool. Now, I don't know. Maybe I'm fanboying too much about them, and there's a couple others I know I'm gonna fanboy about, but they're like, just think about it. Even if, according to Pokemon science, Relicanth is like the great.
All right, are you through?
Great ancestor. It's I don't know. I love it. I think it's really cool. And I'm gonna stop fanboying, and we're gonna keep talking about this coelacanth creature, right? Now, they were thought to have gone extinct with the dinos, but was discovered in 1938 by a South African museum curator. Like a live, living, as they called it, a living fossil for the longest time. Which is why it's often incorrectly associated to have been the same exact species all these years, when in fact, that's not the case. Now, apparently, this thing could have been 6.5 feet, up to 198 pounds, and living up to 60 years or more. So yes, it is not an actual living fossil living millions of years as a singular creature. No, that is also very much against survival, like fitness, because the longer something lives, potentially it's just wasting food because it's not procreating and helping the species become longer, because it might be inert, it might be infertile, but nevertheless, it did have a hinged joint in the skull in order for it to widen its mouth for large prey. And it did have a notochord for a backbone, just like how we do. Again, kind of more just in how we have it in the embryo, though. I just realized I made a mistake earlier, and I should have fixed it. But if I couldn't fix it, then I'm going to state it here. I mentioned chordates earlier, and my brain started thinking about what I just mentioned, notochords, okay? We are chordates, but we weren't like those things that I mentioned previously, okay? Just want to make that clear here and now, just in case. But, continuing up with coelacanths, they also have this thing called electrosensory rostral organs, which they use to detect prey. And I sat there and I said, I have no idea what that means. I'll be honest. I have no idea. Like electrosensory, okay. Using electricity to sense your environment. But what does that really mean? I don't know what a rostral organ is or anything like that. But basically, what it does, ultimately, is it literally just helps the creature tell potential differences in low electrical pulses that are in the aquatic environments, which is helpful for it finding prey in the dark. Now, everything, objects, living things, everything emits electromagnetic radiation. It might be really tiny and inconsequential ultimately, but this creature, the coelacanth, and a lot of other creatures that likely live in the dark, developed their ability to do this, to be able to find prey in the dark through the use of this organ. To close out the coelacanth and relicanth, I mean, relicanth itself, it looks very much like a actual living fossil, having lived a very long time. It itself is very directly and strongly influenced by the coelacanth, as that coelacanth deserves. It would be interesting to see it get a different version or evolution, but I don't think it will, just simply because of what it is. And again, it wasn't a fossil, but it was an ancient Pokemon. Slitherwing! Let's go! Yeah! God, you just take Volcarona. I love Volcarona. Let's just take Volcarona and move it somewhere else. Let's take Volcarona and push it somewhere else. It's amazing. I love it. You just made it again, and you made it more cuddly. Volcarona, best Gen 5 Pokemon. Had to think about it for a second, but best Gen 5 Pokemon, pretty sure. Anywho, now that my fanboying is done when it comes to Volcarona and Slithering, yes, it's a Paradox Pokemon, yes, and this early on, crazy. Wow, right? So let's talk about it, right? So we have to take Volcarona into account, since Slithering is based off of Volcarona in terms of its design at the very least. Now, Volcarona is based on the Atlas moth or the Cecropia moth, okay? And, I mean, you could always look at its previous form and see the more, like, creatures that it's based off of. Very direct looking. Now, it is similar to the female specimen of the Cibissa leucotilis, a bagworm creature. And the Slitherwing itself kind of has, like, the way that its wings are up on its back kind of looks like the spikes of a Stegosaurus, oddly enough. Now, despite it being a very big bug, there's a reason why I placed it here. And if you don't know why I said that, it's because in the next period we are going to be talking about, that's when Big Bug happened. And we'll talk about that later. There's a reason it's here. And the biggest reason it is here is because of how its wings are put away. They're not folded. They're still completely out. They're just up. Okay? Now, because it couldn't fold its wings over its abdomen, it is not part of the group of Neoptera. Neopteras can fold their wings over their abdomen. Think cockroaches, stoneflies, leaf bugs, crickets, cicadas, and more. So it doesn't have the adaptation that the Neoptera have, which Neoptera first occurred in 314 million years ago that we know of. So this creature exists before them, and maybe it existed in the same time as them, but at least existed likely before them. And because of that, Slitherwing is likely related to Paleopterans, which would be where dragonflies and damselflies come from. So, again, despite its also very large size, it is going to be placed here. It makes the most sense in terms of its physical adaptations, excluding size. Okay? Because in the Carboniferous Period, that's when the big bugs happen. It's time to get dunked on with the Dunkleosteus! Oh, gosh. So, Dracovish, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Dracovish sounds better off of my tongue. It has good mouthfeel. I don't know. Nevertheless, the top half is based on the Dunkleosteus, yes, I'm saying that word right. I keep double guessing or double thinking, whatever. Which existed 382 million years ago. I'm going to tell you right now, it didn't last much longer than that. Um, 358 million years ago, 382 to 358 million years ago. And yes, in that order because it's past the present. Now, yeah, that, again, didn't last long. But look at this thing. Look at it. It's the spinning image. Like, head to head. It's like, father, brother, son. I don't know what kind of Alabama stuff I just made up by accident there. But nevertheless, it is, that head, bonk, is armored as all get out. Oh, it's such a big, freaking, stupid, wonderful head. And it wasn't just for show either. That thing actually had function. So it was originally thought, because I love this. I love this Pokemon. I love this creature from the past. So the Dunkleosteus was originally thought to be absolutely massive. Like, they thought it was some 5 meters long or like 10 meters long or some ridiculous thing, right? That's inconsequential at this point. But what ended up happening is, I don't like the method itself. I'm not going to like do the full explanation, but a scientist sat down and studied a bunch of different fish. I mean, an absurd amount of different fish, measuring them and measuring their heads, like the eye to the back of the gill, if I remember correctly, right? And they threw out the idea that we have the total size of what we believe to be a gargantuan beast of a fish wrong. And of course, people sat down and they're like, what do you mean we're wrong? What do you mean we're wrong? All of us agree on this. What do you mean we are wrong? And the guy went, hold on. Check it. Check my data. Check my information. Let's be scientists here. Let's understand that what we have is fact until proven wrong the next time, and more accurately then. And this is what I have. And he shows them what is boiled down to this. If a fish has a long head, it has a long body. If a fish has a short head, it has a short body. And that's what it boiled down to. That's super oversimplification. But it's true. I want you to think of all the fish that you know. I want you to think of little Nemo with the short head, small fish, short fish. Then I want you to think of a barracuda. Sorry, I got scared there. I don't know why I thought for a split second barracuda wasn't a fish. I think I'm... Wow, I really talked about a clownfish and a barracuda in the same example. I'm a monster. Anywho, think of a barracuda. Long head, long fish. Little Nemo,
Short head, short fish.
you know? So, and they decided, let's look at the Dunkleosteus. Yeah, sure, it's a big Jimmy Neutron-esque head, but it's not very long. It's a very short head, rather. So what does that mean? Well, they ran the measurements, you know, did their math, and it's agreed that this thing is about 10 to 12 feet long. Despite that, it was still an apex predator of its time. Do not put shame onto the name of the Dunkleosteus. It was still a monster. Those jaws were absolutely powerful. It has the strongest bite force of any fish, living or fossil. Fish, specifically a fish, not sharks, not anything else, no, fish. Because it is a fish of anything that we know of. And not only that, but with the sheer force in which it moved those massive monster jaws of it, what it did was it created a suction, and that suction would then pull up the food into their mouth, just, and bonk, gone. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, right? And I love it. I just, man, it's so cool. It's so good. Now, realizing as I go on, my hair's getting more wild, and it's probably because it's also humid, so this is gonna be fun. Nevertheless, going back to Dracovish, its fins are, oddly enough, like overall, because of placement and all, more similar to the coelacanths, but at least they're in the same time period. And this creature also references the Elasmosaurus during the Great Bone Wars. Now, I am going to read directly from one of the answers that Steve Brasati gave me to one of the questions that I asked him, because I directly asked him about any situations that he's been aware of or involved in like, or at least similar cases to try and fix these mistakes when it comes to incorrect fossil reconstruction. And he states this: Elasmosaurus is a famous case. During the infamous Bone Wars competition between the paleontologists Cope and Marsh, they were in such a rush to describe new fossil species that their work was often sloppy. It was true. In one of the first descriptions of these long-necked plesiosaurs, the head was put at the end of the tail by accident. There are other similar cases, like when the fossil whale Basilosaurus was first found and thought to be a reptile, and maybe most famous of all, when the dinosaur Iguanodon was first found, the big fossil spike was put on its nose, whereas now we know it was a thumb spike. Stuff like this happens when we first find a totally new fossil. If we've never seen the animal before and it's weird, it's understandable how we don't know how all of the bones fit together at first. And I have to say, nothing makes me so, like, I get happy tears. I get excited. Like, I get so excited. I like cry. I happy cry a lot, actually. I'm an emotional person, if you couldn't tell. I'm a very emotional, extroverted individual. Now, I get happy tears the most. You know, I cry here and there, but like, I get happy tears a lot. And that just gave me happy tears, because nothing makes me more excited and happier to have put in this much work. And I'm not even anywhere near, we're so far from the main meat of what I fell in love with while doing this video. But nevertheless, like, I'm very happy to say that I was able to get answers directly from a PhD holder, a doctor in their field of professional work, to get answers regarding ancient history so I can apply it to Pokemon. And yes, he knows about Dracovish, and he is aware, rather, of Genesect also. That might be a teaser for later, yes. Anywho, the bottom of Dracovish is more like a stegosaur, though. You can kind of see, like, the spikies that it has leading up the tail. But stegosaurs weren't even really around until 150 million years ago. So there's a huge difference in time. Now, the rest of the Galler's fossils, I will mention in more appropriate time frames. So, like, if I were to place this like the rest of them, I would not have placed this until the final time period, because that's when all of the pieces would be there. So don't expect the rest of the Galler fossils until much later. Now, Dracovish itself is all sorts of screwed up. I mean, just look at this dex entry. It is said to have had powerful legs and jaws, which made it the apex predator of its time. Its own overhunting of its prey was what drove it to extinction. And its mighty legs are capable of running at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour, but this Pokemon can't breathe unless it's underwater. So, when in reality, when we look at this, this was clearly not the case, and Pokemon says it themselves, as it is a screwed up fossil, or fossils technically. But now it can run fast underwater and breathe air, so that's cool, I guess, right? That's great, right? Good trade-off. Welcome to your new suffering existence, buddy. Hope you don't mind too much. Now, while I won't talk about it in detail here, again, this Pokemon and its alternate combinations are incredibly, I mean, so incredibly important for a topic I'm going to cover much later. Because if this creature didn't exist, why were we able to revive a Pokemon that didn't actually exist? Because that's not how DNA works. And then everything hits the fan. Welcome. Oh, I don't like that. And then everything hits the fan. Welcome to the next extinction, baby. 25 million years of downfall. Again, these things don't happen overnight. They are a slow but strong gradual decline into non-existence as 70% of all species were wiped out. And it was a combination of things, as most events are. You have volcanic eruptions that eventually caused global cooling. And you're probably like, how did a volcano, which is a lot of heat, cause global cooling? Well, it's actually because what happens is all the ash and everything from the volcanoes, whatever is in there that goes up in the air, there are particles that, I mean, they're just absorbing sunlight, they're blocking sunlight, they're doing all these things. So sure, there's heat in the moment, and maybe there's heat when you don't even have to be super close to magma actually in order lava, for you to feel it. You need to be very careful. Yeah, fun fact, to my knowledge, again, not a research thing, but to my knowledge, when you jump, if you were to jump into a volcano, your lungs would shrivel up first. You'll die of like suffocation and heat before you would hit the lava, and odds are it's solid enough that you're more likely, like, it's more like quicksand almost, and you're just gonna break your bones. So yeah, horrible way to die, honestly. But ultimately, yeah, all this stuff is going in the air, it's blocking light, you're getting like less lights, which eventually cause everything to cool down. We also get mass deoxygenization, less oxygen, my gosh, just less oxygen in the oceans, and we also get more of the expansion of land plants as a part of that. So, you know, they're moving instead of being in the water as much or adapting to try and move on to land. There is also suspect to be a supernova, there's suspect to be an asteroid. All of this just really mess with marine life, and ultimately there's, instead of it being one big extinction event, it was more over like 10 different events or more that happened inside of this time span. So, you know, say goodbye to Dracovish's, one of their ancestors. Bye, Dunkle. I'll talk about you later, I promise. But it's fine, because we're about to talk about the next time period that you might be aware of in idea, but maybe not necessarily the name. The Carboniferous Period. 359 million years ago, formed from prehistoric vegetation, warm oceans in the east surrounding parts of Asia, Gondwana getting closer and closer as it moves poleward again to the rest of the continents as they are moving as well. Tropical land masses remained wet and humid. Carboniferous, there we go. I knew I was going to fail at some point. Carboniferous coal from bark-bearing trees and lowland swamp forests, club mosses, tree ferns, horsetails, tall trees with strap-shaped leaves, all of these existing. And this is where the first extensive coal deposits that we have as a humanity come from this period. And as this period moved on and we had a lot of plants moving onto the land and not a ton of land, especially large ones, but not a lot of land-based terrestrial creatures, to balance that out with the excessive amount of plants, or at least what seemed excessive back then, a lot of carbon dioxide was removed. So essentially, oxygen levels rose to about 35%, whereas they are about 21% oxygen, 21% oxygen these days. I tried to overcomplicate it. I tried to flower it up, and that was the worst thing I could do. Sometimes that's just my mistake. But because of the higher amounts of oxygen, if you were a land dweller that was an insect that could process that oxygen, you got schmassive. We're talking 6-foot centipedes, mammoth-sized cockroaches, 3-foot land scorpions. No, it's not a sea scorpion anymore, technically. It's a land scorpion, and it's 3 feet long. And eventually, the dragonfly, which brings us to our next Pokemon, Yanmega. You'll never get a Mega Yanmega, just give up on that. But remember, Yanma evolves into Yanmega after knowing ancient power and leveling up. So, that's where we're gonna start, as about 250 million years ago, this is where this creature exists. Now, Yanmega itself is very violent, high speed, strong-jawed, kills things in one shot by going for the neck, and can transport adults apparently. Oh, and it's just 6 feet long, so good luck. If it doesn't decide to just snipe your neck as it runs by, then it's probably gonna carry you off. And I don't know, I hate that. I am 5'6". Nope, I'm done. Nope. Anywho, it's based on Meganeura munyi, a particularly large prehistoric species related to dragonflies and damselflies. Now, Yanmega's names technically, I guess, suggest the golden ringed dragonfly, according to the wiki, and Meganeura itself is thought to have had a 2.5 foot wingspan. Full wingspan, not one wing, wingspan, full arms out. You ever go to the zoo and you walk up to like the fence or something like that, and they're like, hey, put your arms out. You get to see what the wingspan of this creature is and see if it's bigger than yours. And you're like, haha, you're a funny little kestrel. I have much larger wingspan. And then you get to, I don't know, an eagle, and you're like, that could smack me from half a room away. Not really, but it's over exaggeration. Now, speaking of kestrels, the wingspan of Meganeura munyi was actually longer than the American kestrel's wingspan. Though, when it comes to the wingspans in general, I was getting a lot of conflicting information. So please take that with a grain of salt and maybe double check it. Because I was having reliable sources tell me different things, and they weren't adding the word average to it or anything like that. So I need to at least say that, because otherwise I don't want to misinformation. I don't want to do that. Either way, this dude was freaking huge, right? And it even had like the compound eyes. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's one of Yanmega's abilities, compound eyes, which dragonflies have that anyway, so but allowed it to see incredibly well. So, very scary. Again, belongs here. Ooh, okay, I teased you earlier. Now you get to know what I'm actually gonna talk about it, because then we have Genesect, the only exception to the non-legendary, non-mythical rule, whatever, because it's a mythical Pokemon. It's not a legendary Pokemon. Nevertheless, here's the big boy, and the exception to that. It is based on the giant insects of this era. Now, the deck says that it came from a creature that, lived 300 million years ago. So it could actually be a number of different bugs. Originally, I was claiming that it was a cockroach, but actually, especially through the wiki's help, bless, it resembles a tree hopper's pronotum. And I had to sit there and go, what the fudge is a pronotum? I looked it up, and it was very hard to tell, but it's like the back wing kind of looking thing. I don't know how else to describe it, so I'm trying to describe it in as layman terms as possible, because I don't know how else to. Which makes sense, because if you look at Genesect, it has the big piece that kind of right out of its back, and it fires off as a laser. So there is that. Now, this is ultimately one of the most vague Pokemon based on a creature out there when it comes to this study overall, but high oxygen brought these insects about. But moving a little bit away from Genesect here now, because there's not a lot to talk about outside of the fact that it lived 300 million years ago. It kind of lines up with the era. Actually, it lines up with the era within it. And it came back as a android cyborg. It's a cyborg because it has bio parts to it, right? Dragon Ball Z ruined me. We're gonna talk about this era and kind of the insects in it for a second here, because the high oxygen levels were super great because, hey, they got big insects, big strong insects. But the problem is, if that oxygen level drops, they're gone. They're very sensitive to it, and it becomes a problem. So I will tell you now, some of our insects from this era aren't really gonna survive past this era. I'm sorry, spoiler alert. But before we get out of it, let's fly over some of the other info here of this era that could inspire some future ancient Pokemon or fossils. So in this era of time, in this period of time, amphibians were growing in size and diversity. Some of them actually had a thicker, scaly skin, which helped them combat drying out when they left the water. In addition, this is when the first amniotic egg was produced. This protected the embryo inside with a fluid-retaining membrane while still allowing in air. Huge, massive adaptation. One of the, just beautiful for future life for amphibians. Now, during this time, we also had predators that resembled modern crocodiles. This is when the earliest reptiles appeared. Very small, lizard-like creatures. Now, they're more like, again, I'm gonna start saying the word proto-crocodiles is basically what they were, ancestor crocodiles, so on and so forth. You know, the dip in the toe of water of crocodiles, for what will eventually be some pretty nasty creatures later on. And I'm not talking about the modern ones, I'm talking about the ancient ones that are very scary. We'll get there. Now, the reason for there is going to be a lot of, or if I have said it a lot, me saying, crocodile-like, or animal-like, or proto-this, proto-that, not proto-man, Mega Man, all the enemy soldiers. If you get that, fantastic, anywho, I need to stop letting my brain take over in regards to losing focus. That being said, I will likely start saying these a lot, or these the like and proto, because they aren't our modern creatures. They are the ancestors, and they're referenced this way quite often. Now, here's the other part of it. These creatures, depending on which ones we talk about, might not even be the direct ancestors of so many creatures we know. Again, think like with the coelacanth, we've talked about this. But at the end of this period, all of our land masses were coming together to become the Pangea that you know and love. And if you don't know it, it's the wonderful supercontinent, a combination of all of our major land masses. So, this is where a lot of stuff is going to start beginning. So, we have Pangea, and we are now in the Permean Period. With Pangea formed, this is roughly 299 million years ago. The large, all-encompassing ocean, Panthalassa, if you think of thalassophobia, the fear of, I think, deep water is what it specifically is. I don't think it's the ocean. It might be the ocean. It is all nice and formed now. Brachiopods, gastropods, cephalopods, and crinoids are present. Maybe, again, not the ones that we started out with, the specific species, but these are still here. And especially, probably not specifically the ones that our Pokemon are represented by or represent. In addition, reptiles are starting to move up and are replacing amphibians in abundance. This is going to be very, very important later. And this is where we place the Dreepy line. Dreepy, 270 million years ago. We got this boomerang head right over here, right? Its dex, specifically for Dreepy, does state how it has a habit of biting Clauncher even though it doesn't feed on them. This is said to be vestigial behavior from when Dreepy was alive. Now, let's look at what Dreepy is based on. Diplocallus, boomerang head, salamander, even the same tail. When you look at Dracopult, it grew 3 feet in length, and it's thought to have eaten plenty of arthropods and small fish. It's it doesn't stop here. Let's keep talking about Diplocallus. Let's keep talking about boomerang head here. Its boomerang head may have actually provided it with a few possible benefits. One of them being the fact that it makes it hard to eat, and it is bony. It's a bony freaking boomerang head. Can you imagine trying to eat a creature that had a boomerang for a head? That's gonna get stuck in your throat. You're gonna look like a cartoon character that had like a chicken wing stuck in their throat and they're just dying. Again, let's go back to SpongeBob. Let's not go back to SpongeBob. Stop it. Stop it. Get some help. Squidward. Anywho. Here's a really fun thing too. Here's a really cool thing. Diplocallus may have been a stealth predator. What is Dracopult? It's a stealth bomber, baby. It's a stealth bomber! It's so cool. It's based off of a stealth bomber. It all comes together so nicely. I'm gonna move this out of frame. Let me get that back out of frame. There we go. It's so cool. I love the Dreepy line so much. They're so cute. They're a great salamander, ghost, dragon, stealth bomber, Diplocallus thing that gets so much hate, and it doesn't deserve it, because it's easily one of the coolest Pokemon out there, without a doubt in my mind. It's not a super complicated looking Pokemon, but it gets the job done and has really freaking cool origins. And here's another just fun thing. The Diplocallus's head may have helped it skim across water easier, making it faster. And it also liked water-based habitats, freshwater marshes more specifically. I did try to equate that to the Dreepy line, where I thought you'd find them around water-based areas a lot, which you can, but I don't think it's exclusive to those areas, probably because it doesn't need to be around those areas as much. But gosh, I have to say one more time, I love the Dreepy line. I love the Dreepy line, one of my favorites. Then, unfortunately, roughly 90% of everything dies again. Less than 5% in the seas survive, and less than a third of large species on land. The theory here is as follows. Acid rain came about after the release of volcanic gases from after eruptions, alongside a potential asteroid impact, which there is evidence of the asteroid impact for two things. Some layering of the iridium, but more primarily when it was argued, an incredibly important point was that there is a huge crater where shocked quartz exists, and that's a huge sign. So there are a couple, I think there's 5 different types of I don't even know what to call them anymore. It's been too long. I've been out of geology for like 2 years. But shock quartz really only happens when the asteroid comes down or some large object. Like, it has to hit with an immense amount of force. And when this object, asteroid, hits the area, pressure combined with that force being transformed into heat then cause the transformation from what the area like kind of is into essentially something else. And in this case, we have the shock quartz effect. Again, that's a rough generalization that I was trying to avoid getting hyper specific with every other part of it and keep it to this specific instance. So again, asteroid comes down, it has enough force which puts pressure on the environment that it struck, specifically where it struck, and when it hits, the pressure, force, and then eventual heat that is created, actually the instant heat really, that is created from the sheer amount of force from contact, transformed that area into what can be recognized as shocked quartz. It looks different from quartz if you look at it on a smaller scale. Now, the next parts I'm going to directly quote because I just genuinely do not want to misconstrue anything at this point. From Gregory Vitalik, clouds of noxious gases would billow in and block out the sun for months. Temperatures would drop, and corrosive acid snow and rain would fall. After the clouds cleared, the atmosphere would be thick with carbon dioxide from fires and decaying matter. CO2 is a greenhouse gas. It would have contributed to global warming that lasted millions of years. Now, there could be, and this is no longer quoting, could have also been oxygen depletion, as per this information, especially in the sea, with high CO2 poisoning the waters. And now, I quote Andrew Knoll, oceanic bacteria eating organic matter producing bicarbonate as a digestive byproduct. Without currents, the load of bicarbonate could have grown in the deep ocean. Knoll thinks something big, he's not sure what, disturbed the seas. Bicarbonate-laden water rose from below, he suggests. As it did, it depressurized. Dissolved bicarbonate was released as CO2, making the seas bubble at times like a glass of soda. That is a picture painted perfect in my eyes. An entire sea bubbling like a freshly poured glass of soda. Can you imagine the sounds, the visualization of it? Because if it's cold going to warm or otherwise, you could probably see it even. And that's mind-blowing to me. That's beyond me. I can feel the happy tears happening again. No, hold back the happy tears. They're here. It's already too late. It's gone. But nevertheless, yeah, Dreepy Line is dead. And same goes for Genesect. Yanma is a pretty direct ancestor in this case, I believe. So some Yanma may have, some Yanmega may have survived, and we can kind of potentially rely on the Pokemon Legends Arceus game as a reputable source for that claim, but not their real-life counterpart. Their real-life counterpart is super dead. Mesozoic Era. We're here. We've hit it. The Age of Reptiles! Roughly 252 million years ago. This is honestly where I feel most comfortable, as this is actually where my readings of the book and talking to Brasati all started because I just wanted to do this, and then I fell in love, and I started smiling so much, and I knew this was the right decision. I knew that this is what I want. Genuinely, if you've made it this far, I want to state it right here and right now. If you have made it this far, and you want to support proper, deep, long, 20.5-hour or longer research, deep dives, appropriately done, with proper facts, in an entertaining way, I hope, please make sure you subscribe. Share this around. Share the channel around. Become a member on here or Patreon to help support the channel. I am a small YouTube guy, but I love doing this. I love research. I love Pokemon. Please come say hi in the streams if you have time. I will say hi to my lurkers. I will say hi to you guys who are VOD watchers. Thank you. Go watch the Nuzlocke, whatever it is. Please, I ask for your support, because I have not been this happy in a long time, I have to admit. It has been a very long time since I've been this happy. And to know that I can take this stuff, real life information, and apply it to Pokemon, and learn and teach you, and then learn from you, is one of the best things, one of the best feelings in the world. And the idea of hopefully one day being able to make a living off of it, knowing that these videos take 32 hours or more, I can't imagine the type of work I'll be able to put out for you guys, and the things I'll be able to learn and teach you and learn from you once again in the future. So I'm just excited. I get emotional when I'm excited, and I don't want to stifle that happiness. So thank you for listening to me, and let's continue on to the real meat of this. I cannot stress to you enough, you need to read this book, The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs by Steve Brasati. Take a screenshot. Take a screenshot. There you go. There you go. Right there. Boom. Plenty of time to do it. Take a picture with your phone if you don't know how to take a screenshot. It should be Windows Shift S or whatever. There you go. You learned something, or whatever other way you've learned how to do it. Beautiful book. And I will do my best to apply all necessary info that I learned from this book to this video, with some extra fun facts in here. But if you want to know more, if you want to know so much more than I will talk about in this video, please read it. I cannot stress that enough. Read from the source. After you've watched this video, because, watching this video helps me, please. I want to do more research. It was an honor and very nice that he actually responded to me, sent emails back to me, because he couldn't have an actual interview because he's out in the field. He's out of office at the time of recording. So, with that then, let's go. So let's get into some important information before we actually get into the first period of this era. First and foremost, dinos and crocodiles are archosaurs, upright walking reptiles that started to blossom after the end Permian mass extinction. They survived better because they could move faster and more efficiently. Now eventually the archosaurs split, and you have avimetatarsalians, which created pterosaurs and dinosaurs. Then eventually birds from dinosaurs, but we'll cover that in a couple million years, 100 million years or so. And then you have the pseudosuchians, which created crocodiles. Okay? Now, I will also say, I'm going to say pterosaurs because that's the correct way to say it. It's also less work on my mouth, and ultimately I don't actually care if you say pterodactyl or pterosaur. I just want to say pterosaur because it's shorter. Now, speaking of that kind of creature and line in general, we have the Protodactylus. It is the first archosaur, but not a dinosaur. It is considered a dinosaur morph. Now, what are dinosaur morphs, you might be asking me? Well, why don't I tell you? Well, they're like dinos, but they aren't true dinosaurs. But they belong in that group that includes dinosaurs. True dinosaurs didn't really blast the scene until later, and any that exist are really just the small boys, or at least smaller than you're used to knowing about. We don't get those big 100-foot tall crazy megasaurs or whatever the heck size, until way later on. And ultimately, during this time, crocodiles were the kings, or at least the crocodile archosaurs were, not actual crocodiles by all means. Again, proto-crocodile kind of stuff going on here, right? So, to help figure out what a true dinosaur is, they have been said and defined as belonging to the group including the plant-eating iguanodon and the meat-eating megalosaurus and all of their descendants. Ultimately, Bersati states it as this: it's just really semantics. Visually, they get really similar, which it's talked about in the book a couple of different times where things get messy and it was weird because they're trying to figure out, okay, is this a dinosaur morph or is this a dinosaur? Where does it come from in the timeline? Because really that's the big figuring out point. Although, could you imagine a fossil alligator, crocodile, proto-crocodile Pokemon? Like, I know we have Feraligatr, which, yes, we have, whatever, Fuecoco's Skeledirge. There it is. Pretty cool Pokemon. We have Skeledirge, but, another one that isn't really one that I think lines up with everything. Oh, crap. What if I'm wrong? Okay, a quick look at the Bulbapedia wiki later and just a little bit of here and there, basically pointing out the fact that it is not likely not, based on any ancient crocodiles. It might be based on Egyptian deities or Egyptian crocodiles, a couple different crocodiles in general, a couple of different Spanish folklore tales involving like a similar creature that has an exposed skull, Dia de los Muertos, and so on and so forth. So, luckily, I didn't have to just insert a bunch of fresh research here and now, because that would have been messy. Even though I technically just did that. Either way, I think it'd be really cool to have a proper ancient alligator, crocodile, Pokemon, because when we talk about them later, they're going to be scary. But let's now get more in depth, and instead of just generally describing the era and what will happen later, let's talk about the period. To reiterate what I've stated before, just as a reminder, we have the age, which is the umbrella in which all of the periods are within. So, the Triassic Period is within the Mesozoic Age. And so, the Triassic. Before I talk about the Pokemon in this period, let's talk about the wacky climate. Because hyperseasonality caused by high carbon dioxide was occurring during this time. What does that really mean? Basically, we have a bunch of fluctuating temperatures. The climate's doing a woo. It's not really, like, it's strong. Like, when winter hits, winter hit hard. When summer hit, summer hit hard. That's basically what it boils into. Super basic way of explaining it. Now, there were wildfire seasons and dense humidity seasons. Small meat eaters could manage, but when you get the larger, fast-growing herbivores, plant eaters, they just couldn't. And weirdly enough, weirdly enough, dinosaurs are primarily found in those humid areas. Like, that's where they thrived. Now, with the land that is now, with Pangea and everything, we're talking areas that had, like, dry, arid, hot deserts along that equator. And if you think about it now, I want you to think about any deserts that you know about now, right? Sahara, Gobi, blah, 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 blah. I don't know why, when I said Gobi, my brain immediately went to Legend of Zelda. Gobi is real. It's funnier if I don't double check it, but Gobi is real. Nevertheless, odds are, if those are deserts now, they were deserts back then. Like, oof, right? And with this hotter climate, these drier areas, and areas where the dinos weren't really able to live and thrive, survive, and excel, so that way they could take their throne that they don't know that they'll eventually take, who could take that throne? Who was sitting at the top of the chain? Who was sitting as the king? If you remember, that's going to be our crocodiles. Or rather, the ancestors of our crocodiles again. But because we have these smaller ancestors of our dinos and dinosaur morphs, let's get into the Pokemon that might represent them. First up on the chopping block is... Chopping block? Oh my god. First up on the chopping block, I got it this time, is Ordovician. I hope you didn't forget the Dunkel, because the top is based on the Dunkleosteus. I slowed down there because I doubted it, because I keep almost saying Dunkelosaurus, because I want to say Dunkel, even though I'm saying Dunkel anyway. Anywho, again, the fins might be coelacanth based, and this is very much likely inspired by the Inictozoon, an arthropod fossil discovered in Scotland that was reconstructed upside down. Wow, I wonder what that looks like, Ordovician. So, I tried looking at it, and, my head hurts. I don't like looking at it. Something about it is like, oh goodness, what is the SCP thing? It's the, a cognitohazard. It's like a cognitohazard. It just, as soon as I see it, I feel like I might be a sleeper agent. But, moving forward, the bottom is likely Ichthyosaur, which came about around 250 million years ago. The Ichthyosaur was an apex predator marine animal, and I could only describe it as one thing, in my opinion, as a nightmare dolphin. I feel like if I watched a movie that, like, let's say it's, you know what? No, I'm gonna take that back. I feel like in an alternate universe where, you know, dolphins are still evil, because they are evil. You can't convince me otherwise. They're cute, but they are evil. There are movies, instead of there being like Jaws of sharks, we have flippers, which is like for dolphins or something like that, or blubber, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care, right? And in that, there are these dolphins. In that universe, these dolphins still exist. And no, they're not dolphins. They weren't even real dinos, for that matter. So they weren't in part of either of those groups. They were marine reptiles, which is another example of convergent evolution. Convergent? Oh no. Did I make a mistake earlier? Did I say divergent earlier when it came to Wiglet and Diglett? Ha, beans. Okay. If I made that mistake again, I'm correcting it here. It is supposed to be convergent evolution. Outside pressures then cause you to have similar traits despite being unrelated. Bada bing, bada boom. And this is unrelated to dolphins or fish, okay? This is unrelated. Convergence, convergent evolution, okay? Fantastic. Now, there is some potential that these nightmare, quote-unquote, dolphins I'm gonna stop calling it dolphins after this because they're not dolphins. These ichthyosaurs were over 80 feet long. Blue whales are 80 to 100. That's not okay. Why, nature? Why? I thought Pokemon was bad. I thought Pokemon was bad. And yet here we are. You're hitting me with terror, with nightmare fuel, with the fact that there are things in this world that exist purely just to wipe me off the face of it if I didn't have a brain. And even then, guess what? I'm not like my caveman ancestors or whatever else. None of us are. How many of these animals can we take in a fist fight? I meant the joke at work. Okay. All right, we're going to go off on a tangent. All right, we're going off on a little tangent. Here we go. I'm known for this at this point. Let's be real. I was asked at my job, right, by a coworker. They go, if you were put in a Coliseum match, and this question's going to go to you. So answer this question in the comments. This is going to be fun. If you were put into a Coliseum type match, and you had to, you know, go head to head, no weapons or anything, against another creature, a real life creature, what do you think you could win against? Now, this creature is going to be starved, so that way it wants to kill, right? It wants to. It's going to go after you, and you're doing hand to hand with this thing. What do you think you could take? No hesitation. Zero hesitation. Because I had to clarify that it was a Coliseum type match. I go, I could take a small black bear. And then I go, I could take 2 black bears. And he's like, okay, interesting. I don't think you can. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I could. I could take 2 black bears, even though realistically I probably wouldn't even survive one. You know, but, and then I immediately followed that up with, or an ostrich. And he loses it. Like, everybody at my job loses their mind laughing once they start finding out about it. And losing their mind is a little bit, or laughing is a little bit of a stretch. But they did question me while laughing, because they're like, how does that even work? Why 2 black bears or 1 ostrich? Could an ostrich take down 2 black bears? And I'm like, no, I just know my confidence. I'm short. I feel like I could suplex a black bear, you know, or something like that, you know, and I could win the fight without, you know, actually killing the animal. Whereas with an emu, I'm screwed. I am 5'6". I am a small boy. I am a small Hispanic boy. There's no way. I'm not making it out of that. So I digress. Tell me what you think you could take on. That sounds fun. Don't make it graphic, please. I just it's just a fun, silly little thing. Anywho, going back to Ordovician itself, it froze the area. It was said to freeze the area in order to get its prey, but due to where the mouth location is, it went extinct. Again, you know that this is not the case with any of the Galar fossils because all 4 of them are arranged incorrectly. Now, the body still very much just doesn't make sense when you look closer at it because of that. Because it has the Dunkleosteus, because it has the... it's literally on my notes in front of me, and I can't read it. Ichthyosaur. And potentially Relicanth-based origins as well. Relicanth, yeah, it's coelacanth. So, again, we'll come back to that later, though. Now, we have another Paradox Pokemon to talk about. I'm going to reiterate that all Paradox Pokemon are not direct ancestors and are, by all means, apparently parallels to the Pokemon that they would be otherwise representative of. Again, Slitherwing is not a direct ancestor and is potentially unrelated to Volcarona. Okay? Just keep that in mind for all of our Paradox Pokemon, and I'll try to do my best to mention which ones are Paradox Pokemon as we move forward. Fluttermane, based on Mischievous, also has some basis in spooky stuff, and I'm not always going to mention this, and I probably won't for a lot of the future ones. Basis in Banshees, Bruxa, and Flying Heads. But there are claims that it is the ghost of a pterosaur. Because of that, we can place it at about 228 million years ago, but could be sooner, like closer to modern era, since pterosaurs went on through the Cretaceous Period, okay? Different types of pterosaurs. And so, I also want to note, once again, I don't know if I said it, that pterosaurs are not true dinosaurs. They don't belong in that specific two groups of descendants that we had talked about earlier, okay? Now, here's something that's interesting about pterosaurs, right? They have their wings, right? The stretched membrane wing extends from their fourth digit. They flew really high. Now, think of these wings similar to bats or dragons. It is important to understand that birds did not evolve from pterosaurs, okay? Looking at that, it's just another adaptation that different creatures, unrelated, have gotten. Now, there isn't too much more that I could derive from this because it is the ghost of a pterosaur, so could have just been a general pterosaur. It is also a rumor, no guarantee, big question mark, one of those. So I don't want to speculate too much when I have basically nothing to speculate on. Now you might be asking, where's Aerodactyl? Where's my big old dino wing boy at that's not actually a dinosaur? And I'm gonna tell you, not here. Reason being is, considering their size and how well adapted they seem to be, especially being a, like, kind of king of the sky situation, and its size, I'm going to say that doesn't come in until, like, way later. The ones that we're seeing now are more our proto-Aerodactyls, if you would. But there is another top-tier Pokemon I want to talk about that I believe belongs here. Walking Wake. Another paradox. I love Suicune. Right there. Look at that. Look at that. Right there. Right there. Look at that. I love Suicune. I love Suicune. Suicune, the Ghastly line. I don't have Walking Wake, and I don't have Ogerpon. One day I will, right? I'm gonna move the camera back down. Actually, that's a nice angle right there. I don't know why it was so low earlier. Gosh, oh, they're so good. They took Suicune and they made it better and cooler, and they turned it into a dinosaur, into a theropod, and yes, it is based off of theropods in general, and I need a full portrait of them one day, because the second I saw them, I was so happy. Again, basically happy cry. I do that a lot, man. But again, just based on theropods in general, which are just basically carnivores on two legs, which just kind of fits a long list of these boys, right? And you can, of course, consider the Keelan as per original Suicune, really. And if we were to try and, pinpoint where Walking Wake was more specifically based on, it would probably be the Coelophysis genus, which was 225 million years ago, which were first found during the Ghost Ranch excavation. And this is really cool. So Ghost Ranch, it is a famous paleontological, there it is, famous paleontological site, I can't say it fast, preserving Triassic dinos. More specifically, if we look at the Hayden Quarry, which held dinos as part of Ghost Ranch. Now, what happened here, and this is a lot of what I'm getting from the book, is a seasonal river swept up a various assortment of dinos, moving them right along. There were, a couple of scary crocodiles in there as well. But ultimately, a lot of these creatures got drowned, and they were then deposited into this area and left here. And as we talked about, sediment, burying these bad boys over years, creating these fossils. Now, amongst them were some real scary crocodiles, proto-crocodiles. Again, like proto-crocodile. We had the super skinny, fast-moving, smaller crocodile ancestors, right? And then the Rhysuchians. Really want to roll the R there. Rhysuchians. Furious, 25 foot long, and the top predator of its time. Think of the T-Rex. If it was a crocodile, fits with the same, or similar rather, railroad spike-sized teeth. And a very important pseudosuchian was found here called Ephigia o'keefei. O'keefei. Ephigia being Latin for ghost. Okay? And it was a crocodile that imitated dinosaurs. Very important, honestly. I mean, they sat there and they were like, hey, well, oh no, we found another, a Suchian, pseudo-Suchian, whatever, doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. And then they eventually discovered the fact that, oh, wait, this is trying to be, this is a crocodile, proto-crocodile trying to be a dinosaur. It evolved and adapted similar traits as dinosaurs would have later on, especially. Interesting. So that was probably, and now I'm speaking outside of the book because, was probably just another nice piece of the puzzle that helped tie things together just a little bit better to show the relation between dinosaurs and crocodiles in the past, showing that they were related at one point. Now we have one that exists in the modern age, but I'm still going to pull that it existed way back here. Lapras, based on plesiosaurs. Placodonts for their shell, and more specific because plesiosaurs didn't really have a shell. And Placodonts were a close relative to the plesiosaur that also lived in the Triassic Era, or period. And started living in the late Triassic at about 215 million years ago. Now, this is my part where I get to say and admit I made a mistake. And this is why I want to improve. I said Lapras may not be an omnivore. Yeah, Lapras in, I believe, the Pokemon Moon Pokédex states that it does eat fish. So that was an incorrect piece of my Pokemon food chain video. Maybe one day when the new generation comes out, I'll do a full updated Pokemon food chain, get things right, update the information, and explain things better. Because you deserve that. And that's why this video is taking a lot of effort. But as Lapras existed, it almost went extinct. And now there are so many Lapras that it actually affects the fish population. That's modern Lapras. So let's take a little look into the past here and look at what it did. As it crossed seas often, or at least it crosses seas often. And if we look at plesiosaurs, and we look at how Lapras is very caring for others and very kind, that feels very motherly. And you can look at plesiosaurs who are thought to have cared closely for their young and were pregnant with one child at a time. And of course, I know you're gonna ask, well, Krillic, what about it being a Loch Ness monster? Well, that monster is a cryptid, which is very much based on plesiosaurs, or the plesiosaur. So, one and the same, but here's the big kicker, here's the big difference here. there's no actual evidence that the Loch Ness Monster exists. I'm all down for the fun. I love cryptids. I think they're amazing. I think they're cool. They're fantastic. I love them. I have a fascination with a lot of cryptids and horror stories and so much more. But when things hit the wall, and honesty has to be said, the cryptids for a reason. They don't exist, you know? So, there's that. Although, let's have a little tangent, shall we? Let's talk about large creatures existing in our world, because they do exist. You have colossal squid, so on and so forth, right? And we have the ocean. On the ocean, you get tales of sailors going across the sea, and during their time, they end up seeing a large kraken, or they end up seeing a large monster, tentacles breaking the surface of the water, beasts unlike anything they've ever seen before. And yeah, sure, there's a possibility that some of it actually happened. Some of it. Now, you might question, why don't we see that as much these days, but it does still happen. That's because of the advent of boats, or suspected to be the advent of boats. Now, again, this tangent is fueled by my memory, not by full-on research, so I highly recommend dig deeper, and you might find stuff that I might not cover here properly, okay? Or there might be extra details that we might have found out. Now, ultimately, boats in general cause a disturbance on the water. Now, any disturbance on the water really messes with aquatic life, right? I want you to think back to the coelacanth, right? The coelacanth has the electrodoohickey thing that allows it, electrosensory organ, that allows it to sense minute electric signals or waves or whatever. Well, a disturbance on the water is more than minute. And those disturbances do go deeper than we think, right? Especially when you get into the bigger boats, not just the smaller ones. So as people are going and doing their thing on the water and creating these disturbances, these large creatures that are relying on not seeing, let's say, or maybe they are, but they're also relying on their other abilities, it's all getting disturbed. What do? You get away from it. You go deeper. You get these large creatures that start to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And they may have already originally been on the surface of the water. And there is a strange phenomenon where the deeper you go, I can feel the Undertale people. The deeper you go, the messier it gets. If I had it my way, you'd already be dead. Anywho, that song is way burned into my brain. The deeper you go, it happened again. Deeper you go, the larger they get. It's a weird phenomenon, right? And so essentially, deeper equals bigger. And that's where suspected a potential number of some of the largest aquatic life exists. Incredibly deep, dark places, and they are incredibly solitude. And because they're so large, there's very few of them suspected. So, another really small thing is, you know how I said there were like giant monsters with their tentacles breaking the water? You know, giant eels and all those other things. Well, there is the chance that the people who saw these things may have seen something very phallic from a whale. I don't want to say the other words because I know I don't. I know that there are all ages kind of watching these videos or being shown these videos, and I don't want to say something too, you know. So I'm going to say phallic, something very phallic. And I'm going to put that demon on you to, you know, explain if you are parents who has to explain. I think that's funny to me. But from a whale. And because the descriptions match up pretty well. So that's fun. That's a fun little thing right there. But let's get back to the main topic. Death. Pangea starts to finally fully split about 201 million years ago. Fissures, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions from buildup of pressure leading to this final point of release. All of that pressure gone, and in that moment, Pangea breaks apart, bleeding lava, literal pillars of it, to the point where lava is covering the land in 300-foot thick waves as noxious gas then enters the air. And this isn't a, oh, it's one time and went okay thing. No, this is constant over time. 3 million square miles of Pangea covered in lava. Global warming goes rampant. Call in the bargain deal because at least 30% of all species are gone. Woo! God, it is chaos up in this. So, I also realize it's about time I actually talk to you about global warming, and I'm going to say it in an oversimplified way. To my scientists out there, to my fellow environmental students. I guess I'm not students anymore. I gotta watch what I say. Please bear with me, because sometimes I think the simple way to explain things is sometimes the best way in order to get a point across for people to understand. Because I'm very upset over the idea that this topic is considered controversial and this topic is considered political, when in fact it is not, and I'm going to explain to you why, for those of you that might think it is, or who may not know what global warming or climate change is, in a very simple way. Climate change, overall, is caused by global warming or cooling. This is the overall climate. We're talking weather patterns, temperatures, so on and so forth. Okay, if you've ever noticed, some of our weather patterns are changing. We're seeing a shift where it's staying or getting warmer later in the quote-unquote spring and staying through later in the winter. Now, global warming and cooling is by all means natural. Oceans move, things freeze, things melt, so on and so forth. And it's suspected that in quite a few, I don't know, I'm not even going to put a number on it, more than 100 years, I'm just going to say that, way more than 100 years, okay, you can look it up, the next ice age is expected, right? And I'm not going to put an actual number because I don't want to mislead you, because those numbers might have been updated as well since I heard about them a year and a half ago, okay? In our modern day, we as humans accelerate this process amongst other natural occurrences. This acceleration stops creatures from being able to mate and adapt in time for preferable traits to continue their species' survival. That's what, like, these things are, and global warming itself is literally just, you can look into it, it's literal just the warming of the globe, and it would happen naturally, as we've kind of seen, as we've talked about the history here, but our acceleration of it through the means in which we have caused it is part of the problem in this day and age, right? And I vehemently despise the fact that this is a controversial topic because it shouldn't be. And people shouldn't yell at each other regarding this information because things get very disgustingly heated, and I'm not a fan of that on either side. But there are people on both sides that get disgustingly heated, and it's a matter of communication. So let me be that first point of communication for you, and I hope I open you up to this, as in comparison, like, it's not, like, there's a lot of misinformation that's happened in the past, and that's been a big part of a lot of this too. Like, they'll sit down and say, oh yeah, farms are the number one reason. No, that's not even close. The farms are not the number one reason as to why global warming happens. In which case, and I'm not going to go too much deeper into this, I promise. I just need to get this off, and I want to throw this at you, and I'm very passionate about it. And, but the farms are inconsequential in comparison to other things like the entire Amazon forest getting ripped down. And you might sit down and you might say, well, we plant trees all the time. There's a huge difference between cutting trees down than replanting them. The Amazon forest, having so many trees, gets a lot of carbon dioxide out of the air, and when you get rid of that massive swath of land that has these trees absorbing carbon dioxide, you have now gotten rid of something that gets rid of it and created a sink, which has happened as when a plant dies, it releases carbon dioxide in the air. It is now creating more carbon dioxide. And it's not something where you can just say, oh, I'll plant 1 billion trees in North America when we've cut 1 billion trees in, the Amazon. No. And then that's not an accurate number, of course. But no, that's not how that works. It's not. It's just not. Okay? And there are massive companies that fuel their factories to the max. And part of that is simply due to supply and demand. They're gonna meet what we demand. That's their job. They have a bottom line. They have money. And that's why there's a lot of stuff that goes into all of this, and why you're recommended to shop locally, why you're recommended to grow your own garden if you can, so on and so forth. There's so much to this, and I'm very passionate about it. Very passionate about modern environmental stuff in general, and very often refuse to shut up about it when given the appropriate chance to actually speak to people about it. And I feel like this is my mini platform in order to do so. So, anywho, I digress. Thank you for listening to me. And do your research. Do appropriate research, please. And shop locally where you can. Learn. Adapt. See what you can do. Let's go back to the past. Everything is dying, life sucks, creatures are getting buried in landslides, trapped in the mud, suffocated by ash, rushing rivers, rising new volcanoes, continual destruction, and they can't adapt fast enough. Unless you're a dinosaur, and even then, plenty died. So, let's think of it. Our lovely little dinos did have one very nice upper hand, or they're at least suspected to have had it. Because originally the big question was this: was it just luck in how they survived? Maybe. That was probably still a part of it by all means. I mean, look at the number of things that died, and the number of things that happened. I doubt, things in general. It's chance. There's got to be chance involved. There's too much happening. But one of the leading theories as to why they may have survived is because of their proto-feathers. So, you're probably very much aware, being in the modern age that we are in, that you know now, and if you didn't know before, you now know now, dinosaurs had feathers. Okay? And we're going to talk super in depth on that later. But dinosaurs had feathers. This could have been as to show off to the ladies and really, strut their stuff and try to attract a mate. It could have been for insulation, to help regulate their body temperatures in this wacky environment. And that goes into keeping them alive long term. And despite that adaptation, we have lost a lot of creatures, like I've said. Walking Wake being one of these specific dinos I would like to say that was lost. And so, in spite of this, we get the rise, the beginning of the rise of our lovely dinosaurs as they're on their new path to dominance. Welcome to the Jurassic Period. Look, it was either I make that joke or I say, can I make talking about dinosaurs interesting? Jurassic, I can. It was either that, it was one or the other. I'm gonna be real. And I'm keeping both of those in there because, I don't know, I'm done being embarrassed about how stupid I can be. So about 201 million years ago, dinosaurs started to diversify far more. They spread around the globe, colonizing human areas, deserts, and everything in between. They don't just gotta stay to those humid places no more now, do they? And they got much larger. Now, the Stegosaurus lived in this era at about 152 million years ago. You know, those wonderful buzzsaw-backed dinos. And those will be important later. I'm sure you probably figured out what Pokemon I'm probably going to talk about. And by the middle of the Jurassic Period, the ones we know and love are finally here. Some of the big boys. First of the big boys that I'm going to talk about is Aerodactyl. He's here. More specifically based on, again, later on pterosaurs, in my opinion, at least from my understanding. I could be wrong. So we're going to kind of slot them in at about 163.5 million years ago, and its mega form may be attributed to features lost by streamline evolution. So if you look at its mega, it has like the rocks all over its body, and they're not really useful. Maybe it lost them because it was an adaptation that it initially had, or something. An adaptation it initially had because of display, weaponry, whatever else. But I'm moving my chair, so that's what you're seeing. I'm sorry. Ultimately, it didn't need them, so it lost them, streamlining its body to make it energy efficient. I don't know. I'm not gonna. Someone else can talk about that. That gets into like DNA type stuff that I don't, genealogy and all that I'm not qualified to talk about, nor have I done proper research on specific genealogy to reliably regurgitate information to you. Now, Aerodactyl overall, I can support that it was kind of in this era, is the fact that it was restored in modern times using genetic material extracted from amber. Again, this is Aerodactyl's information. Some casualties occurred during those attempts. Even still, this restoration is not considered perfect. So maybe its megaform is exactly what it was. Maybe it did get streamlined. I don't know. But nevertheless, it brings about an important piece of information. DNA extracted from amber. Which I have to say goes against every scientific finding or understanding of the modern age. Because, yes, there are fossilized insects in amber, but DNA hasn't really survived that. And that we're going to talk about more later on. So again, DNA has not survived in amber. At least, not that old especially. Okay, here's another one that gets me real giddy. That I mentioned them earlier, and I've mentioned feathers, and I almost made them as a part of the thumbnail. So, like when I mentioned it earlier as one of the first options, Archan and Archaeops, based on Archaeopteryx. If you are a part of the Patreon or a member of the channel, you saw my post saying, hey, here's a very familiar looking dinosaur, ain't it? 146 million years ago, and absolutely massive for our understanding of dinosaurs, massive for our understanding of evolution, and massive for our understanding of how birds came to be and how they are not just generally related, but descendants of dinosaurs. That birds are dinosaurs, and that's so cool. It's so cool. Okay. Whew. So, the reason for this, it goes all the way back. Archaeopteryx is first found. Charles Darwin sits down and claims that birds and dinosaurs have a deep history, because they were incredibly lucky that when Archaeopteryx was found, it was the first one that was found. And again, feathers do not preserve well whatsoever, especially with fossils, okay? So in this scenario, whatever happened, Archaeopteryx, or at least this specific first skeleton of Archaeopteryx, was found, it had to have been very quickly buried, probably under a bunch of muck or landslide or whatever else it was, because otherwise it would not have preserved. Like, it had to have died and immediately been preserved. Like, woo, fast, okay? Now, Darwin throws this idea out. He's like, yeah, birds and dinos have a deep history. I don't know what Charles Darwin sounds like, I realize. Oh boy. Hopefully that, yeah. And then his best friend, or a best friend, Thomas Henry Huxley, decides, I'm gonna back this up, right? And then he doesn't just back it up. He doesn't just back up one of his best friends. He takes it a step further. And he goes, birds descended directly from dinosaurs. And oh my gosh, there was already debates and anger and frustration and people saying you're stupid and all this stuff, right? And then Huxley walks in and says that, and then it's a real, you know? So, he moreover says that he's relating it to the Compsognathus, okay? And let's keep walking this line. How do you prove it? How do you show? How do you know? How do you know this isn't just a weird, convergent evolution? How do you know that this isn't just an ancient bird? How do you know anything else, you know? Well, you know, what if it was just a weird half bird, half dino that was a genetic dead end that didn't result in birds? And they racked their brains for so long, and they were trying to find proof, and they were unsure if they were ever gonna find true, actual, genuine proof, because guess what? Feathers don't, they don't preserve well in fossils, and it keeps coming back to that. And so you live in a world where you have to show that proof for these things. You can make your claims, but it's time for you to back it up. And then it happened. Sinosauropteryx. When they found its fossil, and they looked real close, they found a halo of feathery fluff fossilized with it. And since then, over 20 species have then been proven to have a similar matter. If I remember what was stated in the book directly, Darwin, cried, or Huxley cried. One of them cried. They fell on their knees, basically, and cried. Because the sheer, gravity of finding this out is insane. Something that lived hundreds of million years ago, 146 million years ago, is the ancestor of the freaking seagull out your window, the robin, the ravens, the quails, emus and falcons, osprey galore, all of them. They're all dinosaurs. All of them. And I think that's amazing. I think that's cool. That makes me really happy. That makes me really excited. And So, the only way that a lot of these had been preserved, wow, I have tears in my eyes. I knew I was getting passionate there, but that was, I would say rein it in, but whatever. Brasati states, he's like, and it's something I actually said earlier in the video. He goes, yeah, the only way that a lot of these were found is because they were pretty much, or a lot of them were pretty much preserved Pompeii style. Just completely covered, dead after being covered, basically. They're gone, you know. And overall, all of this was just proof that it wasn't just some strange evolution. It was multiple species. It developed further. It wasn't a genetic dead end. It was an adaptation. And it's cool. it's cool. I'm trying not to like, go get super emotional again, but it's super cool. More specifically though, birds are considered a form of theropod. And guess what? Arkin flat out says that it is the ancestor of all bird Pokemon, which is technically not wrong by all means. Now it might not be like the ancestor of all bird Pokemon, or birds, or in terms of, you know, Archaeopteryx, like all, but whatever. Arkin hopped around for its movements, and Archaeopteryx could fly, but in short bursts, like a pheasant. So that lines up. And have you ever seen a turkey or a pheasant fly? It kind of gets mind-blowing when you realize that they actually can do it, and they'll go like a couple of meters and land in the tree if they want to get away. And this game kind of goes, maybe not the same exact distance, but similar enough for chickens all in all. And when we look at Archaeops, it does claim to be a better runner than it is a better flyer, and that it needs to run before taking off, which, I mean, yeah, actually, all of that pretty much lines up. And I'm happy Ammonite is on the thumbnail because I think it looks really cute. But if I knew that people would get super interested by it, and people who like haven't been in Pokemon in a long time would understand it, I would have put, I think I would put Arkin on that thumbnail, but I also don't know if I could do them justice in terms of drawing. I haven't drawn anything feathery at all. So, but man, Arkin, Archaeops, I already liked them. Now they've just gone up so much. I need to redo my Pokemon rankings one of these days and just rate, like actually give ratings to every single Pokemon. Okay, here's a headache. This one actually frustrated me a little bit, and if there's arguments on this one or anybody who has additional information on it, please share it. I tried to go to accredited sources for this one. This is unrelated to the book. This is Terapagos. Lots of mixing around for the timeline. I already knew I couldn't rely on Pokemon Dex entries to give me a proper timeline as to when certain Pokemon existed in regards to our own. But here we go. So, likely based on sea turtles, and Terapagos is said to have gone extinct 2 million years ago. Not 200, not 20, 2 million years ago, okay? Now, related to the Galapagos tortoise, more specifically Lonesome George, who is the Pinta Island tortoise, the last one of its kind on that island, and will, when he is gone, they're extinct, unless something has happened. That is what I know. It also comes from, and this is from the Bulbapedia, there's the Japanese legend of Minogame that it could be related to. It could be related to the turtle that lived 10,000 years and grew a tail of seaweed. And there's just such a long list of things that could be related to. Maybe related to world turtle, stellar from the Dex, which states that it resembles the world as the ancients saw it and a planet floating in space. Could relate to turtles all the way down, which is the idea that you have the world turtle and there's another turtle on its back, and then again and again and again and again and again, right? And then it might also be related to the diamondback terrapin or chitons. I wanted to say it might have been related to the Unitosaurus, which is because I thought Terapagos didn't have a shell when it's not in its terrestrialized form. But I'm wrong. I am very wrong on that. And Unitosaurus was supposed to be, that we know of, the oldest relative ancestor of turtles, and it didn't have a shell. But again, I was wrong, and originally I would have placed that 260 million years ago. Wrong. So I'm wrong on that. So within the same time frame, if I'm going to base it off of sea turtles, the first sea turtle, according to National Marine Sanctuaries, was 250 million years ago. But Terapagos, in my opinion, is way too developed to be the first sea turtle. So, again, I didn't really go by the Pokemon timeline for a couple of these other Pokemon, because otherwise our timeline would be super screwed up, and the dilation is a whole other... I don't even know if you could dilate it. I don't know if you could do the math to dilate it to try and line it up properly with our timeline, which I'm not going to do that. But it's an interesting concept if it could work. So, in honest, genuine words, I don't know where to place Terapagos, and I'm kind of just placing it here because I feel like this is the most appropriate with the amount of information we currently have, and maybe we'll get more with Horizons. I don't know. I haven't been watching it. Gosh. I want to. I also have so much more Pokemon I need to watch. We'll get there. What I can really guarantee, though, at least, or hope I can guarantee, really, is that it was at least around and developed by the end of the Jurassic Era. And now, you're probably sitting here wondering, where's the big extinction? No. Jurassic and Cretaceous has no massive event that happened. Sure, there might have been some things that happened for sure here and there and everywhere, but no massive extinction event. It's just separated from Jurassic to Cretaceous for sake of organization for us humans. Welcome to the Cretaceous Period. If you know dinosaurs, you know what's going to happen by the end of this. About 145 million years ago, things were much warmer. There was little to no ice, and the sea levels were about 170 meters higher than they are today. And we're beginning with a bang, because we have Koraidon, technically another Paradox Pokemon, and I'm gonna just kind of blast through this little bit here. Based on a number of different lizards, the Anole, Satana, and Serrata, which are fan-throated lizards, frills of the iguana, feet of the gecko, prehensile tail of the chameleon. It's got those fun feathers on it like dinosaurs do, and when you look at its apex build, it looks like old depictions of theropods. Its special move, Collision Course, references the future meteor that will, boo! Spoilers! The alternate name for the Apex build is Winged King, which may reference or be a reference to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It might, as a whole, Koraidon, be a reference to cave paintings in Matravieso in Spain. And it's also similar to Cyclizar. I place it along the lines of the T-Rex line. You could, if you want to, try and put it like when all the other lizards existed, but I don't feel like that's appropriate. Considering all the information we have here, it feels like a proper ancestor that should be more, closer. It is a lizard. It's not really a dinosaur, even though it looks like one. You know what I mean? So that's where it sits. I don't actually have much other speculation or thoughts to talk about here without getting into pure speculation that might lead me into saying something wrong. So I'd rather not do that. And instead, I would rather talk about tyrannosaurs and sauropods, which are going to be very important very, very quickly, because there were plenty of tyrannosaurs. But the T-Rex was only in North America. Yes, that means United States and Canada. And they're suspected to have invaded from Asia. Yeah, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, specifically, is said potentially to be a invasive species from Asian continent. Now, this was when the land masses were still connected, tearing apart, and they saw their opportunity and went, we should go. We should go. We're gonna have food over here. We'll see you later. Bye-bye. I'm gonna go get food. I'll see you. Bye. And then they came, around and just rose to the top in their new lands, okay? So, we'll cover more of that later in the Tyrannosaurs. Or at least Tyrannosaurus Rex. But Tyrannosaurs in general were strong, big, smart, but not quite reaching the levels of the true king, of the true T-Rex itself. Sauropods, big ol' long noodle neck monsters, especially the massive ones, had more freedom at this point, more safety. For example, the ones in South America did not deal with the T-Rex. It just didn't. It wasn't a thing. It didn't have to do with the T-Rex, which is crazy to me because I always remember just video after video after video after video or depictions of dinosaurs where you would see the T-Rex come on in and grab the sauropod and boom, just bring that thing down to the ground. And no. I mean, sure, there might have been sauropods where the T-Rex could get it, but like, I thought the king was everywhere. I thought it was everywhere. I thought that's why it was called the king. But I mean, I guess you have a throne in one spot and you're just boom. But like, I really, really genuinely thought T-Rex was everywhere. And it was just curb stomping every single dinosaur in existence as a solo creature. And that's not the case. That's not quite the case. Ancestor Tyrannosaurs were, of course, smaller. And the first ones were really you and me sized. But that's like kind of before this period. I just didn't feel relevant to talk about it until now. So I digress and let's move on. Amora and Aurorus. Now, I'm going to start saying when certain creatures existed and perished, because some of them aren't going to make it to when everything, boom, everything perished. So 132 to 127 million years ago, it also had a long sail along its back, 12 meters tall, and found in Argentina. Amora states that it went extinct like 100 million years ago, which, I mean, yeah, it roughly lines up. Sure, we'll take it. However, although Amora was restored successfully, it is not expected to live long in the heat of the current environment. It calmly lived in cold lands where there were no violent predators like Tyrantrum around. We're gonna come back to that specific information later. But otherwise, this means that it lines up perfectly with the information that we understand and know. And also, what's really fun is those frills. They're based on the aurora lights. Really cute. When we look at Aurorus itself, it has ice crystals along its body. It's taller, of course. It can create ice walls, encase foes in ice. And it's rumored to actually be the one to be able to create auroras. And it has a very queen-like motif as a counterpart to Tyrantrum being the king of dinosaurs. So that's fun. Along the lines of sauropods, weirdly enough, that I don't know. The wiki says it, and I respect that, and I see it more and more as I look at it. But Paradox Pokemon Sandy Shocks, based on Magneton. And I didn't realize it. I had to look at multiple models to try and find one that represented it properly. But outside of it having like the long, stretchy legs that it actually, walks on instead of floating with, it does have a long tail. It has a long tail that scoots out from behind it. It's said to be similar to Diplodocus, which is a sauropod, and lived 152 to 145 million years ago. Diplo had an overly long neck. If that's a reference to something, I'm sorry, I don't know. I just like saying Diplo. Which, that neck was genuinely actually too long. What? Way too long. Slinky neck over here, getting stretched out like some sort of dude in an early Squash and Stretch cartoon. And it was suspected that they had ligaments that would help hold their head horizontal, and when they wanted to raise that noodle neck of theirs, what they would do is they would use their tail to help keep balance, so that way they could kind of move one and the other, find their balance, so on and so forth, and eat where they need to eat. Honestly though, I don't feel super conclusive on this, but this might be as good as it gets. Going from complicated ones that make my brain hurt to the blessed easier turtle fossils. Tortuga, based on Protostega, and the extinct genus of sea turtles known as Protostega gigas, lived 85 million years ago. Now, Perseus is a big boy turtle. Big boy, one of the largest, widely spaced bones with leathery shell, and was 10 feet long. Amazing swimmer, never got tired, and behaved much like modern sea turtles, even going onto land to lay its eggs, which was rather difficult for it, honestly, because they were just really heavy. Like, they had the flippers, but they were just really heavy boys and girls. The boys aren't going onto land to lay eggs. Why did I whatever. And of course, there is evidence that sharks were trying to eat them as well. We don't have an ancient shark Pokemon, do we? I don't think we do. I'll let you tell me in the comments. But that'd be ballin'. Other deep sea beasts probably tried eating it as well. And I also realized that when I say beasts, I usually associate that with mammals, sea creatures. Its evolution, Caracosta, is not really far off by all means. It fits into the same family tree or family as Tortuga and Protostegia gigas. It is like more based off of the Archelon, the largest marine turtle ever documented that we know of. 15 feet long, even bigger than the previous big boy. Barnacles and small school of fish also accompanied it often, is what we believe. And otherwise, there's nothing extra here. It's fairly the same as the sea turtle. I mean, it's... Look at that ancestors, Chief. Oh, you've waited. Remember our boy, the Anomalocaris? Remember our boy, Anorith? Well, guess what? We finally hit it! It's evolution! Armaldo! Based on Therizinosaurus. Now, this is existing about 85 million years ago, which... Yeah, it has a very similar upper build, you know, with the big old scythe claws coming out, right? The bottom, though, is pure speculation. There's no actual full-on evidence that it looks like that below the waist. And to me, this thing just looks like, it's just skinless. It just looks like, if you know the Aristocrat SCP-3288, yeah, that's what it reminds me of, and it makes me very uncomfortable. But yeah, it had scythe-like arms, and now this again shows that, you know, Kabutops, Scyther, this thing, they all adapted these scythe-like arms to attack, defend itself, so on and so forth. And so it was a common adaptation that was useful. Why wouldn't you want to have scythes strapped to your arms? Are you trying to hug your loved ones? No? Then screw it. Have scythe arms. Buy scythe arms today. But the Western Australian Museum says that apparently this thing could stop a Tyrannosaur dead in its tracks. And I don't think it said Tyrannosaurus Rex, but Tyrannosaur in general, I suppose. But honestly, there's a chance that it could have, because it's suspected to have been a fat 5 meters tall. Too bad Armaldo lost that height and shrunk over all these years, especially when we tried to revive it, and it only got a full 1.5 meters. So, oops. Now, Armaldo still keeps its design idea closer to Anomalocaris. It still had its wings, which helped it swim, which... what more Armaldo, or not Armaldo, and Anorith. The shell protected it from attacks, and those claws. Ooh, those claws. Punching through steel slabs with ease, which can apparently be extended and retracted. I wish I had shorter sleeves, because then I could have just, you know. Now, Armaldo doesn't claim to be an apex predator, but it was definitely a threat in those prehistoric times. Now we have Tyrunt. Oh, you better bow down, because the freaking king is about to be here, baby! Based on young Tyrannosaurus species in general, extra inspo from the Gorgosaurus because of the crest that it kind of has, 80 to 73 million years ago. Tyrunt itself sounds like tyrant, and it is a runt that throws tantrums, spoiled, selfish, powerful jaws, and the Pokédex says that it lived 100 million years ago. But now, let's talk about Tyrantrum. We're going to talk about the Pokemon first. 2.5 meters, feathery fluff around the neck, ridges like a king's crown on its head, claims to prey on Amora, which doesn't align with Amora's dex, interestingly enough, and named king of the ancient world. Likely lived, in my opinion, somewhere else from Koraidon, considering if we want to base it on the real Tyrannosaurus Rex, which it very much, like, is, I mean, freaking has the crown, sure, it was the king of the world, but king of where it was, very much like how we see the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And Koraidon was somewhere else. Heck, Koraidon, now I think about it, might have been one of the reasons why... Oh gosh, what if that's it? What if... Okay, alright, tangent here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But Koraidon split the Earth is the idea. Koraidon split the Earth and ravaged the lands or whatever the heck happened, right? Now, what if Koraidon is the reason that Pangea split? That would make more sense with some of these lizards. That would make way more sense with some of these lizards. I'll let you decide. I'll let you decide. That's a speculation thing. That's a speculation thing, and then I'll let you decide on that. Back to the king. Let's actually dive deep into the Tyrannosaurus Rex itself. We're gonna dive deep and talk about this phenomenal predator, because so much of this new info that I found out blew my mind. I've been sharing this with people that I know personally, and it has been I'm just gonna continue, because if I stop here and try to explain how I feel about it, I'm not gonna be able to find my words. So, I also want to quote Busati in his email to me directly. I asked him a couple of questions, again, to reinforce my knowledge, and then ended the mini Q&A actually asking him something simple, which is just, what's his favorite dino? And his exact words were, T-Rex. I know it's cliche, but to me, T-Rex is one of the marvels of evolution. It was literally the size of a bus. Its head was the size of a bathtub. It crushed the bones of its prey, and it had a big brain and keen senses too. It had brawn and brains, and that made it the ultimate predator. And I'm going to tell you now, all this next info is basically burned into my brain with just little notes here and there for me. This thing had railroad spike teeth. I talked to you about that previously when we talked about Archalodons and the descendants that were the crocodiles. One of these teeth, they wanted to figure out just how powerful these teeth really were. So, by comparison, they were able to look at dinosaurs of the past and see that I believe it was a Triceratops, it might have been a different one, that lined up with, let's say, a cow, of one of the specific bones from a cow. And they used a proper tooth, or at least what they could replicate in the tooth, and were able to find out that one tooth could exert 3,000 pounds of force. These things have 50 to 60 teeth in their mouth. 3,000 pounds of force by one tooth. And with these teeth, I'm going to tell you this. With that much force, you need to have, you have gravity and normal force or whatever. Everything that you exert comes back at you, right? Right. So if you're going to have a mouth that can do that much power, that much strength, that much force, then what you need is a head, a skull, thick enough, powerful enough, formulated just right to be able to actually take that force back at you as you're going to rip into your prey and pull your teeth out. Or not pull your teeth out, but rip them apart, really. Which, yes, their teeth dug into the bones. Not even dug, pierced through bone easily, so that way they can rip their prey apart. It's insane, the sheer amount of power this thing had. And guess what? Unlike everything else that we've learned, they weren't stupid. No, they really genuinely weren't. They had a big old brain, and they were actually smarter than a dog, but not smarter than your like high-end chimp. Again, the book talks about that more in detail as per the numbers, and I don't want to misconstrue these specific numbers, okay? Now, these things grew at about 5 pounds a day as a teen for a decade, and these things only lived for like 30 years. They didn't live for a century, you know? Bersani puts it himself, he's like, they are the live fast, die fast of dinosaurs, and again, you know, they lived at most 30 years that we know of, right? They had keen sight and smell. They were amazing, phenomenal hunters in that aspect. They were agile, but unlike Jurassic Park, where the T-Rex was keeping up with the Jeep, boom, 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 no. The T-Rex could run like 20 miles per hour. That Jeep's gone. There's no threat whatsoever on that. But while it wasn't going to chase, and while it's not super fast, especially compared to a lot of other dinosaurs and everything else, allow me to paint you a picture. And this is a picture that I'm going to relatively paint from the book. I want you to imagine 3 dinosaurs. Spoonbills, whatever. Just spoonhead, whatever the heck they're called. I don't know. Drinking by the water. When suddenly, poof, right from the area, right near you, bursts out a T-Rex. One gets away. One gets bitten, and a tooth is lodged into it as it runs off, breaking away with the tooth. And the T-Rex still turns around, grabs the other one, breaks it, kills it, and then 4 other T-Rex come right on out. The best part about that is, other than you now knowing that the T-Rex was an ambush predator, it hunted in packs. And, assumedly, it might not be 100% accurate, but the leader of that pack was the one that broke out from the brush. They burst. Burst strength, burst speed, ambush predator, pack tactics, monstrosities with a big brain, big teeth, big muscles. And guess what? You're like, oh, well, what about his tiny little arms? Well, guess what? Unlike some other tyrannosaurs or other creatures that might have had little itty bitty arms that stick close to its body, guess what? If that Tyrannosaurus Rex bit into you, it's then taking its arms, because you're now close to its body. Oh, you are close, and it doesn't want you to get away. It's gonna take those 2 muscled up arms that it actually has and grab you, and you're done. You're done. You're done. Once it has bitten you, and especially once it has actually grabbed you, you are done. This is peak. The T-Rex is phenomenal. And like, I can understand why Bersani loves the T-Rex. Massive. Peak. Literal, actual genetic peak. There is a reason it was the king, and the rest of the world is lucky that it wasn't all over the place. All these dinosaurs are so lucky. And I say it once again, I cannot do this description pure justice. Go read that book. Go read that book. You get the opportunity. I picked it up from a Barnes & Noble. You could probably get it online. I do not care. Barnes & Noble, please sponsor me one day. I'm nowhere near big enough, but, you know, that'd be cool. I'd love to get books for free or something like that. I don't know. From there, let's step down from the king, and let's talk about Dracozolt. The top of it is related to the Dromaeosaur. Lived 76 to 74 million years ago. Not very long at all. And the head is real raptor-like and very feathery. It had a big old claw on its foot. So that was fun. And the bottom of Dracozolt has got some Stegosaur stuff going on once again. Except it's not like a weird body. It's an actual lower half, appropriately. Still the wrong dinosaur, though. I did have to place it here because of the Dromaeosaur part. I did mention this when I was talking about Dracovish and how I would place the Galar fossils from then forth. Because you need all the parts of the creature to exist in order for it to be made by the modern age. And honestly, I think Dracozolt, the little like raptor yellow head, looks super cute. Not a lot of info here. Although it may be a reference to how people thought dinos were evolutionarily inert, which can be said about the rest of these, where it was over hunting or didn't take care for anything else, and it just ate or destroyed until there was nothing left, and then it died. So like the evolutionary inert idea was like get bigger, get stupid, get sluggish, and die, which like incredibly incorrect, especially when we look at the T-Rex, right? Flipping over to Arctozolt, which is the last of the Galar fossils. Bottom brings us back to the Ichthyosaurus, the top is the Dromaeosaurus, and we've talked about both of these parts literally just recently. And even though I just said it, I mean, look at that face, it's so cute. And to reinforce one last time about the Galar fossils. They might have, I realized I didn't mention it. They might have been related to the Crystal Palace depictions of dinosaurs, which is a comedically incorrect, like, gallery of fossils, unless something has changed since then. But nevertheless, very comedically incorrect. I doubt they would have changed it. But one last time, actually, about the Galar fossils is we will come back to these in a few hundred more million years. Because ultimately they shouldn't exist. They are proven to have said that they shouldn't exist, that they are revived incorrectly, yet we have somehow revived them anyway. That should be raising questions and big old flags in that head of yours. Now, let's bring up the enemy of the T-Rex, Shieldon, based on ceratopsian dinos, you know, like Triceratops and so on and so forth. Likely the Protoceratops, which, you know, lived 74 to 70 million years ago, and they kind of just like a grandma that would actually be able to offer me sugar cookies from that tin, and the cookies would actually be in there. I don't know, it's the beak, it's the way the face is shaped, it's the way that like the back of it goes. I don't know, it just looks grandma energy to me. They had no horns on their head, they just had that big thing. Yeah, I don't know, it just looks like Squidward when he got sat on. Now, Shieldon does follow this line of logic fairly easily. It did live 100 million years ago. It states that it was generated from a fossil dug out of a layer of clay that was older than anyone knows. It has a sturdy face. But then it evolves into Bastiodon, which more specifically resembles the Chasmosaurus, which lived 76 to 74 million years ago. I mean, like, woo! Look at that big head with that curved extension going right off the back of it, and those big 3 horns. Which actually, let's talk about Ceratops in general. So, Triceratops, you know, they have their 3 horns. That's cool. That's great and all. The front one was the one for like attack and defense primarily. Meanwhile, the other ones, the other 2, that was to attract the ladies. And don't get me wrong, though, as Brasati actually states it, there's a very good chance that they weren't shy, and when it came to battle, they probably still used those top horns for battling as well. So, if they had to, they would. They, of course, were herbivores. Meanwhile, if we look at Bastiodon more directly, they are representative of the unbreakable shield, the opposite and counterpart to Rampardos, which is the unstoppable force or the spear. These 2 mortal enemies, which doesn't really line up, you know, with real life, but we'll talk about that later because it's a little shaky, oddly enough. Bastiodon's shield was said to be stronger than Diamond, which I feel like Cloyster says that. I feel like Steelix says that. I don't know how many others, but those are the ones that come to my mind. But they also did shield their young, and I mean, look at that Bastiodon smile. That's a smile everyone can love. Speaking of Rampardos, though, we're gonna go back to Cretaceous. Based on Pachycephalosaurus, lived 69 million years ago, which, yeah, it's got the ridges and it's got the dome the same exact way, maybe even the face shape a little bit, and it ate plants. It did have flat, curved, and serrated teeth, which some scientists have said that this might potentially mean that it could have eaten meat. Unsure though, but it would participate in headbutting contests. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? So since that sounds familiar, let's actually lean into Rampardos now. It more so resembles the idea picture of Stygmoloch, and Dracovish 67 million years ago for both of those. And yes, if you know dinosaur timelines, we're getting real close to things going crazy again. And I will say that there is speculation that both of those alternatives might just be younger forms of the Pachy. So, the Pachycephalosaurus. So, big question there. Pretty ironic considering Rampardos is the evolution. And going back to the headbutting contest thing, Rampardos did headbutt everything. And honestly, I want to talk about it here, but Past Me did a much better job talking about it. So screen's gonna get smaller for a second here as you're gonna see a short where I talk really freaking fast, so enjoy that for like half a minute, okay? I'm reading your favorite Pokemon because they say truly skilled trainers should win with their favorites. Rampardos, champion of headbutts. Based on Pachycephalosaurus, this Pokemon has a skull that has grown to be a foot thick as it just headbutts everything. It'll headbutt a rock, a tree, you, your mom, nothing is safe, not even skyscrapers. As when they first revived it, it escaped and destroyed one with a single headbutt. The Pokedex is a little mean as they were known to have small brains, so people think they went extinct because of their stupidity. Despite that, they deserve plenty of loving headbutts as they have my approval. Subscribe and convince me to rate your favorite Pokemon next. Yeah, this Pokemon was so dumb. It headbutted everything until it couldn't headbutt no more. Everything looks like a nail when you're built like a hammer. Okay, so this is post-shower, post-workout acrylic. Guess who missed a couple of dinosaurs? And is finding out through some edit, and it's only because now this is very off the noggin. Okay, a lot of them are gonna be in this era, right? A lot of them are gonna be in this like in this, not era, this period of time, okay? And I know I'm sitting, I know that's not normal, but right now I'm a little tired, and I want to make sure I address these, right? I literally have the pages up in front of me, and some arguments that some people make, in addition to the general information that I can at least confirm. One of them, and this all started because, what user was it? I'm going to flat out name the username of the person who reminded me of my lovely dinosaur right here, my Chikorita line being a freaking dinosaur. So if I look at this, Dr. Phosphor, thank you so much for reminding me. It has been a very busy couple of weeks leading up to the charity stream, so this is pre-charity stream still. But if we look at Meganium is another sauropod, and in addition to that, it might be based off of the Apatosaurus, in addition to what was mistakenly thought to be a dinosaur of sorts, the Ichnosaurus, which is an ancient plant where when they looked at it, they're like, well, this isn't the Cretaceous period, and this is all a bunch of little pieces here, and they flat out thought that it belonged to a full-on dinosaur. So there's some level of mistake there, and I genuinely actually love that. I didn't know that about it, and it makes sense that like they would take that little bit of info of, oh, they thought this plant was a dinosaur. That's cute. Well, let's turn it into a dinosaur. Let's make it this wonderful the dinosaur plant thing. That's really cool. So I get why some people now make Meganium a dragon type now. Just because of that ancient, attachment to it. Others that would be along these lines would include another one would be Tropius, banana boy, or girl technically. So that one's another basically sauropod. It's got the long neck, it's got the 4 legs, so on and so forth. But it's got like the tropics idea to it, which is really cool considering dinosaurs primarily survived incredibly well in the more humid environment. So if you're a tropical dinosaur, again, another grass type, or grass flying in this case, that's really freaking cool in my opinion. Once again, we get that nice meshing of what history was with what they wanted to turn it into. That one's fairly simple. It says, I'm looking at Bulbapedia honestly for this. It says it may also be inspired by the Mokelemembe, a cryptid creature said to live in the Congo River Basin, which is most described as a sauropod of sorts. And then you have Agron, very directly based off of a Triceratops of sorts. This is one where, I mean, it could have also existed around this time, and its hardened features could have allowed it to exist potentially, especially because it lived in the mountains. Again, not going super depth into some of these because that also delves into a whole other line of information that was not heavily researched, and this is more of a like insert edit of sorts. Garchomp is one that was really interesting because I did see some arguments that some people believe that Armaldo, due to its features, eventually turned into Garchomp of the modern day. Now, Garchomp does have shark-like features, dinosaur-like features. It has so many different things going on for it. It even has like the same like claw things go. I'm not wearing my jacket. Oh, I just realized that. But nevertheless, it still has the same like scythe-like things coming off of its arms and its like the front of it, which is more like a spike now. So, I mean, I don't think that they would actually be related. Again, it's something I've talked about earlier in this video where you have convergence due to external pressures, but I could understand the argument for it. Haxorus is also very much along these lines, but at some point you have to ask the question, are you making these arguments because they're dragon types and they're reptiles, or are you making these arguments because they actually are related? I, again, could see Haxorus being more dinosaurs, but they are more than likely lizards, reptiles in general, not necessarily full-on dinosaur, or anything along those lines. Nidoking and Nidoqueen could technically also go here. If you really want to argue it as well, maybe some level of Triceratops inspiration there. But again, I'm only placing it here, or at least mentioning it here, even though I'm not 100% sure. Again, it has features, but I don't think it would have been so much around in the past, but I can understand arguments that would say that it would be. Baxcalibur, Tyranitar, I'm not even, I mean, yes, again, standing lizard, just because it's standing on its two legs doesn't mean that it's going to be a dinosaur necessarily. It's more of a Godzilla thing, and that's where I'm going to leave those. And then the last one, honestly, that I will mention here that I just generally forgot, and I feel bad for it, especially since I'm just doing a very quick once over, but at least with a lot of these dinosaurs, I do talk about them with other Pokemon, such as with Sceptile here, which is said to be based more off of the Dilophosaurus, which I know I've mentioned somewhere in the video, in addition to like the yew tree plants based off of that, especially when he gets into its mega form, and those like berries that it has, or even the berries it already has, can be used to refertilize and make the land new, good to grow things on, so on and so forth, and it is known as like a protector of forests. And if you look at its previous forms and their dex entries, it often ends up mentioning how it is like the king of the jungle of sorts. So it's really interesting to see that this, which has some of these more carnivorous based dinosaur features or background that would be incredibly good in the forests, would have also been this turned into a creature or Pokemon that is the king of those forests, would have been speedy through it. There is some argument that like, yeah, a Velociraptor, I mean, moving through the forest incredibly quickly, so on and so forth. Again, very quick once over of a lot of these, just because I don't want to leave them out, and I've been reminded of it, and they deserve the talk about them at the very least. I feel like I said that as if it was like the talk, you know, the birds and the bees. No, we're not. No, stop. So with that, I'm gonna send you back to past Krillic, who is going to talk about the rest of the Pokemon of the era in the full detail that they deserve. Thank you so much for entertaining this section where I genuinely did a little oopsie and needed to resolve it appropriately because you guys deserve it. I'm gonna stop rambling. Bye. I'm gonna be real honest with you on this next one. Roaring Moon, I did not know where to place. Based on Salamence, It's another paradox Pokemon. So it's not an actual ancestor, but it has plenty of feathers representative of the dinosaurs. It's ruthless as all get out, and it looks like Salamance's Mega Evolution. So clearly related, but not directly, as we've been running through. And I've genuinely got nothing left here. I just expected... I expect if it's gonna be this developed as a creature, again, Salamence could be salamander, dragon. Salamanders are also technically dragons. If you've watched Fairy Tail, I think they reference that. I want to place it here. It's so developed. This is that you can't tell me this isn't an apex creature based on how aggressive it can be or powerful or anything it can be. It has to be in the peak era like other dinosaurs are in this period. So since we're on Paradox Pokemon, let's just jump through a couple more of them. I'm going to preface this with I am following the Wikipedia on this as best as I can, and it gets a little iffy here and there. We're starting to step out of the comfort of a lot of the really, really strong research. I want to preface that now, okay? So, Brute Bonnet, based on a Mungus and an unknown dinosaur, likely inspired by Zygites megalocarpus, a parasitic mold that infects mushrooms, and could be inspired by FIMS. And I quote, fungal infection mammalian selection hypothesis, which considers that fungi contributed to the extinction of dinosaurs. According to the FIMS hypothesis, most of the flora dying out in the events of the extinction that is about to happen led to a massive fungal bloom, provoking infections that dinosaurs and other reptiles would be less resistant to than mammals. Brute Bonnet itself is a 1.2 meter fungus, low intelligence, and a powerful savage attacker. It went full rampage as a mushroom dino, which, yeah, that brings us to the end of this era. But not nearly the end of all ancient Pokemon. We have more to talk about. I'm not forgetting Mamoswine. So the Jurassic Era went out with a bang. Literally. An asteroid came down, the initial impact being in Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. The sauropods there, gone. Eviscerated, first and foremost. But that didn't kill them all. Remember previous extinctions and all the stuff that has happened before? Oh yeah, it's all coming together. And before I continue down that line, the only reason, or a big reason, I shouldn't say only reason, this was figured out, but a huge reason why, was because of iridium. Which, remember when I said iridium is really rare? The idea there when they did their final test, knowing that iridium is incredibly rare on Earth, and it comes from asteroids. If there's a lot of it on our planet, like in layers, when they check through, they had two different things. Either one, there would be a very thin layer, and the asteroid, boom, killed everything. Alternatively, there would be thick layers, thick, incredibly thick layers of it, and that will tell that it was a long, drawn-out process. And it was the second one. That asteroid hit. It caused a chain reaction. It likely helped speed everything up. So, rock and glass rained down from the skies from after the impact of the asteroid, because everything goes up into the air, it cools and solidifies, and it rains down upon creatures of the land, hotter than all heck. And some did cool in the air before striking down the dinos, others otherwise caused third-degree burns upon impact if it just didn't kill them immediately. Others started mass wildfires everywhere. And problem is, since some cooled in the air, all that heat is in the air all around. Oh yeah, and then other stuff happened over time. Tornadoes, hurricanes, more volcano eruptions, skies of ash, suffocation, darkness, cold. Then, when the skies opened up and light streamed through with hope, the sky spat on the face of the dinosaurs and poured acid rain upon them, screw your plants, screw your sea life, screw everything. Yeah, pretty much just absolutely terrible all in all for life and all of existence in those moments. And I believe in the Pokemon world, we might have two Pokemon that may have been a part of this. One of them being Gouging Fire, which is based on Entei. Entei has Ceratopsian origins, more notably the Styracosaurus and Sinoceratops, due to the arrangement of horns, thank you Bulbapedia, might relate to the Deccan Traps, a volcanic formation in India which may have influenced extinction of dinos, which was formed during the Cretaceous Period. So, volcanoes are forming, you're getting all these massive volcanoes that might exist to this day and age, all forming up, and the pressure's there. Boom! You know, it exists. But I don't think, I mean, the Gouging Fire wasn't alone in this, and yes, they are Paradox Pokemon. They were not alone in this. No. They weren't the only reason for this. Let's talk about Raging Bolt. Based on Raikou, resembles our dear sauropods like the Brontosaurus. By the way, the Brontosaurus, like its name, apparently translates to Thunder Lizard, which is pretty sick. So it kind of goes one-to-one. Thunder Lizard, Raging Bolt. Woo! So also had probably some inspiration from giraffes and storm clouds, your head in the clouds, the Keelan, which actually translates to giraffes apparently as well. The list kind of goes on, right? But I'm going to throw out another direct quote from, Bulbapedia, the PokeWikis. Raging Bolt's ability to incinerate everything in its surroundings with lightning may allude to how several rock and coal samples imply that wildfires were very frequent in the Jurassic Era, in which most sauropods like Brontosaurus lived. Soil studies also implied that the Jurassic Period had abundant rainfall and storms. What did we just talk about? Mwah! Oh, it lines up so perfectly. I love it so much. But with that, we close off this era. Thank you again, Brasati. I for your book. I've enjoyed it. Oh my goodness. It was amazing. The book was phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough. Thank you for also emailing me. I doubt he's not going to see this. There's no way. But nevertheless, it's a thank you. I appreciate it. It means the world. And it was the first step to me making sure I'm doing my due diligence for you guys as my audience. So that's where his information comes to a close. And we move on to the Cenozoic Era. Here comes some mammoths. Technically, here comes the mammoths, but we're going to talk about the Pleistocene first. So, the Pleistocene Period, beginning about 2.6 million years ago. You see why Tropicos doesn't quite make sense, by the way. Global cooling and glaciers galore, the last ice age. Again, I'm not going to talk in excess about the conditions of the overall era or periods, as I don't wish to mislead you. So let's get into the last of the Pokemon for today. Citadel and Cetitan. Now this one actually was a little bit of a headache, and I'm going to argue with you and everybody else, and I will fight everyone to the death over the idea that Citadel is the cutest Pokemon in existence, and I refuse to take anything else. It's slander at this point. But thank you, PBS, as they helped with the next two bits of info that I'm able to share with you today. I originally thought that it was going to relate to Artodactylus, since walking whales in real life and cetaceans are based on them. These are hoofed mammals that include hippos, pigs, and deer. Then they also have a very unique bone, which is the involucrum, from fossils, which are like just the dense leg bones, and the unique feature of astragalus, which is found in an Indohyus, being the closest relation to whales outside of the cetaceans. This would be 47 million years ago. There's one problem with this, though. Citadel is a cetacean, and Citadel clearly states that it was a whale that walked onto land. Whale to land, not the other way around. Not land to water. So not mammal to whale. So that throws a wrench in my plans. So I start doing research again, and I'm like, wait. Because I double checked it, I was like, that's wrong, something feels awful here. Great, I have to do my due diligence, let's do this. And I found Pakicetus. The size of a dog and walked on land, Pakicetus was a shore-dwelling creature with webbed feet that lived around 49 million years ago, recognized as the first cetacean. Again though, it went from land to water. So it's still not it, because unless I'm missing something, there wasn't a whale that went to land. It was just land to water. And maybe that's just, maybe there's one instance, right? Maybe there's one instance. And, maybe it walked onto land and it lost the webbed feet, and it decided to stay on the land because of its thick fat. And I believe Cetotl is moreover closely related to some of the other whales, like the blue whale. And maybe its evolution into icy lands not only got rid of the webbed feet, but also gave it its horns because they eat ice and snow. This is a evolutionary, question that I can't expound on, because not only is there probably not information in real life on it, but also I'm just not qualified and I could not find anything to properly bring this one together. So, big question mark that I'm not quite satisfied with. Next we have Great Tusk, based on Donphan, another paradox, and it has relation to mammoths or mastodons. Now technically, mastodons were around at about 23 million years ago. This would be in the Miocene period before this period, but honestly, it's kind of hard to place because they could be alive at this point, and I'm not the most comfortable, again, talking about that period of time, and I don't want to spread misinformation. Though, Great Tusk does have the same adaptation as others have had, with it rolling into a ball like armadillos, despite being unrelated, which is really fun, because there was, alligators that did that, and Armaldosaurus, which also did it, which originally I thought was what Armaldo was related to, but that's not the case. Really fun stuff overall. It also might be related to, the incorrect idea that, reptiles turn into mammals or stuff like that, because it has scales, it has dinosaur-like traits while being a mammal. We finally have Mamoswine, which we're going to talk about Mamoswine first, which it originated in Hisui, oddly enough. Likely based on the woolly-hided pig, Mangalica, also the woolly mammoth, of course. Now, it is odd since the last woolly mammoth that we know of died about 4,000 years ago, and the Edo period was in 1603, beginning in 1603, right? And here's the really fun part, right? So there have been multiple attempts to bring mammoths back, which I will talk about more later alongside our Galar fossil friends and a little bit more fun information, right? So we'll come back to that. But the one last fun bit of information is that woolly mammoths were the smallest of the mammoths, and you can tell mammoths apart by their dentistry, more specifically, their molar development. So that's just a fun thing. I think it has to do with the number of crowning, how the crown looks overall. There is the mammoth documentary thing that I do have included in my sources, so you can always watch that after this. But for now, we move on to the very last Pokemon I wish to place here, and that is going to be Screamtail. Based on Jigglypuff, might be related to bats or vampires, and its appearance is similar to, as per the Bulbapedia, to the stereotype caveman depiction, the way that they look all in all. So, era in which it belongs is unclear. Now, I would like to throw out the idea that, this singing that it can do, which it might just do screaming, so on and so forth. Oh, sorry, it is a Paradox Pokemon for those of you that may not know. And modern Jigglypuff sings and will sing until their opponent goes to sleep or it passes out. So that could be a survival trait that it picked up from when it was still a Screamtail or similar to Screamtail, since they are not direct ancestors. Yeah. Kind of a loose one overall, but I feel like considering appearance and everything, it belongs here. And especially considering Jigglypuff is fine being around humans and likes to sing for everyone and everything all the time. So I'm willing to hear arguments. It's kind of a toss-up, I'll be real. But from here, we start to move forward in time. We see the end of the Ice Age, and eventually find ourselves through the eras until the present day. But something is very, very wrong with fossil Pokemon. So much so that I don't believe any of these Pokemon existed as we think they did in the past. At least, not as Pokemon, but as normal ancient creatures. This last part is my argument against ancient Pokemon. I do not believe that Pokemon existed in the past, that these fossils were animals, that they were regular, normal animals that then died and became Pokemon only because we revived them. And I'm going to base this on the sound logic of information that we know of this day and age. So we're going to talk about real life DNA. Mammoth and dinosaur, the revival of species. We're going to bring back Mamoswine, and we're going to talk about those Galar fossils. So, mammoth DNA. While some has been preserved, where it's been in like nearly intact chromosomes, in 52,000-year-old skin samples, even if you look at mammoth molars where DNA has been found and attempts at revival have been made, they have failed. Now, a big key about mammoths is they have unique hemoglobin that allows them to brave the cold and stay warmer alongside their woolly exterior. African elephants are descendants from mammoths, and there has been talk of essentially trying to get a mammoth Indian elephant hybrid. So you take some of the DNA, you don't inject it into a live one, but embryos and so on and so forth, and you create, hopefully, a mammoth is their idea. And of course, there's a lot of back and forth on if that is ethical, if should you do that, is it worth it, and what would you even do with a mammoth in the modern day and age? It shouldn't just be in a cage in a zoo or anything like that. That's just wrong, right? But even then, that is incredibly difficult. There hasn't been any real success, and it is a stretch, right? Now, let's look at dinosaur DNA. I previously stated that DNA isn't preserved in insects in amber. They've tried, they've looked at mosquitoes, and ultimately, it has been decided that DNA can survive a maximum of 1 to 1.5 million years, with the oldest mammoth DNA they've recovered potentially being 1.6 million years. Now, yes, that is an incredibly long time, but 66 million years ago. 66 million years ago, that was the end of the Cretaceous. Roughly. They're gone. They're so beyond gone. It's not possible. I'm sorry. Dinosaurs are not coming back. There is no Jurassic Park happening. Maybe you could try and, recreate them, but they're not the same. Just be happy with the birds, right? Yet, we still have all these different Pokemon from the past, despite this limits on how long DNA survives. And your next line is, but Pokemon is in the future with high-tech equipment. And to that I say, that equipment is powered by infinite energy. Yes, this is a whole other ball game. What even is that, you might ask? Basically, let's look at Pokemon X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire for our answers, as infinite energy is basically derived from Pokemon. Long story short, Pokemon have a special life force within them. That life force is powered by what we named infinite energy, and that energy is used to then power up and allow them to perform their attacks. That is where it all comes from. No, that is not how Pokemon poop. That is not how it is. Everyone who says that is a liar. You do not understand anything. Sorry, I'm very passionate about the whole how Pokemon poop thing for some reason. I don't like misinformation, and I feel bad if I ever do that. Nevertheless, especially because there's Pokemon that are proven to poop. Shut up. Nevertheless, that energy is used by Pokemon when they perform their attacks. And that energy was used by humans to create a world-ending weapon to end the 4,000-year war that AZ was a part of. Now, it also powers the Devon Corporation and their products, power submarines, and so much more. So let's assume that the world derives primarily off of this energy. Why wouldn't you? It is literally called infinite. As long as there's Pokemon, there's energy. So what if revival machines use this? And I'm sure they do. Because let's look at not only old DNA not surviving, but let's also look at the Galar fossils. All 4 of these Pokemon are not supposed to be alive. They have been forced into reality, organs reconstructed, bones fused, personalities created, bodies in real life take months, if not years, to ensure that when transplants are completed, a rejection does not occur. Depending on the body part, of course, and if it's something like your heart, then you're on medication for the rest of your life. Otherwise, your immune system will beat it down harder than a JoJo villain. Literally, will just self-destruct. And if you just said, well, duh, we revived it together, so it's all one immune system now, well, then you've created a whole new immune system. A whole new immune system. Something unnatural. Once again, something that shouldn't exist. And these Galar fossils flat out are saying, yeah, they can't, it runs fast, but it can't breathe on land. It runs on a water grate. And all these other little things. They shouldn't exist. They shouldn't be around. How are they fused together? So I present to you my theory. Fossils in the Pokemon world were all our normal animals and creatures. Now I won't delve deep into this next part, but it would line up with the idea that Pokemon existed after all the animals went extinct, which the original writer of Pokemon stated. I talk about that whole thing where the animals are in Pokemon way more in another video, which you could go watch. And you probably should go watch, assuming it's not 4 a.m. for you already. But I will say, sure, some people may have evolved from Pokemon, but not all. And no, we can't quite rely on the anime for the fact that humans are so durable. It's a cartoon after all, right? But all that gets into a much more extended theory that I can't quite put completely together right now. Ultimately, though, this is my theory. Normal animals existed. History went as per normal. Extinction. Somehow humans and Pokemon came to be. And using Pokemon energy, we are bringing back old fossils, reconstructing their DNA with our understanding of species, thinking only Pokemon exist, or that they should be Pokemon, and reviving them with Pokemon DNA because that's what we have, alongside the use of Pokemon energy. This is creating new Pokemon, not reviving, but creating new. And yes, I know there's a whole episode of Pokemon where Ash and the gang run into some of our Gen 1 fossil friends, but I still question if those would have been the original animals and or Pokemon that they were. And maybe there's a little bit of a mix. It doesn't have to be all-encompassing. At this point, this could cause me to talk in circles. So given all the information and basing it in our reality, I ask you, what do you think? Given what factual information we have, where do you connect these dots? So, with that, I have completed the entire history. 22.5 hours of research. And once again, if you want to support deep research like this to explain Pokemon and teach you a thing about our world, please be sure to subscribe, share the channel, and even become a member on here or Patreon. It is because of you and your comments that I wanted to do my very best and make this as accurate as a video as possible, not only to Pokemon, but to real life, and really do my research on this. So, with that, thank you to the members that you're seeing on screen right now. It should be on this side. If you're a member on the channel, you get special emotes. Both Patreon and regular members get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes screenshots, sketches, and so much more. But let me look at the next deep dive, as it should have hopefully been voted on by now. As at time of recording, let me see. At time of recording, it's 352 votes, and it's perfectly split between plant, sentience, and grass Pokemon, and Pokerus in DNA. Fantastic. I need to start doing research sometime soon, y'all. Although I do have other stuff going on. So, maybe not the biggest deal. But, hopefully that vote decides itself and it doesn't say 50-50 anymore. Oh my goodness. But, in the meantime, please check out my other videos, my Nuzlocke, come say hi in the streams, the other theory videos and explanation videos, and I know, trust me, some of those have a few bits of information that could be, that could be better, or might be incorrect. Keep the comments, they are helpful. You guys are wonderful. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!